There are a number of speakers that are signed up to speak, so please make sure to keep your comments to less than 3 minutes. The first person on the list is Farah Rodriguez.
Good evening, everyone. I am here as part of the Restaurant Week Committee in collaboration with the Springfield Business District, and we are proud to announce this year's 4th annual Restaurant Week, and the dates are April 20th through the 29th. And this year, for the first year, we have a kickoff event, so if anyone is interested, it will take place April 18th from 5 to 8 at Arte Pizza, and tickets are being sold for $15 on the Springfield Bid website. This year, we are happy to announce there's 33 restaurants as of today signed up, and every neighborhood in Springfield is being represented. There's food from all the way from Italian, Latin, Mexican, American, Indian, soul food, Caribbean, and Irish this year. And all restaurants have a $20.18 prefix menu, but for the first time, depending on the different price points of the participating restaurants, some of them are going to be ranging from $5.18 all the way up to $30.18. And all this, I want to thank the Springfield Business District, and some of the Restaurant Week committee members are here today, and everyone that has helped us in this journey and making it to our 4th year.
So this is the 4th year.
Yes.
The 4th year that this group of folks has been working on Restaurant Week. This came about from a subcommittee that Councilor Fenton at the time put together, and these folks have worked really hard to make this success. So we thank you very much for your commitment.
Thank you.
The next person on the list is Julio Des Des Silva.
Hi, everybody. Okay, my name is Julio Des Silva. I live in Springfield for many, many years, over 30 years. And something just was brought up to my attention by, driving around and so forth. I noticed that a lot of the city vehicles are being brought home. Every day we pay for that vehicle and also the insurance and the gas. I did send an email to Orlando like about 2 months ago, and his answer was, get in touch with the mayor's office. That's not an answer. I wish that somebody can tell me, we pay, the people of Springfield, we pay for the gas and the insurance on these vehicles. Why are they allowed to take them home? I don't think whoever has a job can take a vehicle home. We pay for the gas and the insurance. This money could be used to reduce our taxes or something, or the trash fee be eliminated. I did send, like I said, emails to Orlando about February 1st, and this answer to me was, thank you for contacting me. Please contact the mayor's office. And on the second email that I received from him, the answer was, the city council took it up 2 years ago. And I asked him, what was the answer? I didn't get no answer. Why are they allowed to take the vehicles home? Can somebody let me know that? Does anybody know why?
So Mr. De Silva, councilors, has contacted me prior to tonight's meeting. He brings up some concerns that may or may not involve the council. I mean, I think at this point it may warrant a subcommittee meeting if anyone would like to volunteer to have a subcommittee meeting to discuss company vehicles or city vehicles being taken home. Councilor Edwards?
In previous times, be happy to have general government, or include it on an agenda for general government to answer his questions and give him a concrete answer as to why certain department heads and employees of certain departments are allowed to do so.
Thank you, Councilman. Mr. De Silva, is that okay
Yes,
with you?
as long as I get an A, I'd like to know why. You know, and when I contacted you, the answer was, you know, contact the mayor's office. And the other answer was, well, they took it up 2 years ago. That's no answer.
Okay. Well, we'll be taking this matter up in subcommittee, and so
Okay.
our office has your information. When Councilor Edwards schedules that meeting, we'll be sure to let you know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next person on the list is Mark Checkwitz. Did I get that right?
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, council members. I hope I have your attention today. In the past, I have been here to speak to you about issues concerning the future of MGM in our city, which I supported, but also, as I spoke to Mr. Mathis many times, I was most concerned with the future of the residents of my city. I also spoke after certain meetings with Mr. Kennedy, and both of these conversations circled around the internet gaming revenue that MGM will receive one day in the future, that Springfield will not partake in at no point. So I left both of those conversations very unsatisfied. But today I'm still concerned with the socioeconomic future of the young people of the city. In negotiating with the city, MGM Springfield was asked to put a lot of money to develop certain items. Among those were an ice skating rink and a golf clubhouse for a country club in Springfield. Where was the money for basketball courts? Are these items, ice skating and golfing, really what we look around and see the young people of our city doing? Is that what we really see? I don't believe so. Now, starting this past quarter, we are paying 1.5% on our real estate taxes extra for community preservation. What is community preservation? Who lobbied for this? Well, I would say this. These are people who lobbied to preserve the past. I need to stand here and ask you that we secure the future of our children. These are people who were concerned with preserving history. We, the city of Springfield, should be concerned with making history. Across the street from me, I live on Stratford Terrace, corner of White Street, in Ward 6E. There is a school that is over 100 years old. It is a school that has 2 buildings. So I'm going to ask you, it is a White Street School, specifically. It is 3rd on the list for Springfield alone before the Massachusetts School Building Authority. And I want to point out to everybody that the Massachusetts School Building Authority, the MSBA, is an organization that receives 1 cent of every 6.25 cents in tax that we pay. One organization gets 1 penny of the 6 cents that we pay in taxes. So this is an organization that needs to be held accountable. They have a model school program that has funneled money to multiple schools in suburban communities without one single elementary school being built in a model school way in an urban community. White Street School has 2 buildings. I return to this again. Why? Because every day, children have to funnel out of the building, put their coats and boots on, and walk across to the next building, right alongside Scott Street, where there have been 2 shooting murders in the last 3 years. This is an issue that needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed soon. I need all of you to email or contact the governor, who is the chairperson, or not the governor, I'm sorry, the treasurer, who is the chairperson of the MSBA. They will be meeting tomorrow, so the sooner that you can get this out, the better. The names of the board members of the MSBA are readily available. But I ask on a level, a Springfield level, that we secure, that you make it happen, a resource officer for this one particular elementary school. These children have, after one of these murders, these children walked out of one building to another building in open sight of a crime scene that was taped off. Covered. A body was covered. Okay, this is a real threat. And we all know what has happened in the past. We all know what will happen in the future. We do not want that future to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Betsy Johnson.
My name is Betsy Johnson. I'm the convener for a group called Walk Bike Springfield. We're residents who are working to improve walking and bicycling conditions in Springfield, and particularly have been focused on the implementation of the Complete Streets policy that the council passed now about a year and a half ago. You have on the agenda tonight, and we assume that you will vote to accept the Mass Department of Transportation grant of $365.22 that are earmarked for Complete Streets improvements. These will include bicycle racks for libraries, additional bicycle lanes throughout the city, sidewalk improvements, particularly handicap ramps, as well as another a host of other activities for improving walking and bicycling in Springfield. Particularly, I wanted to point out that I really wanted to come and be able to publicly thank the Department of Public Works and the Engineering Department, who worked very closely with us to come up with the list of projects to move forward with, and then worked with us to actually submit the grant to Mass DOT that was successful. And we're, in fact, currently working on a request for a second round of funding that's due on May 1st. But I wanted to make sure that they get the full recognition for doing this work to bring in these state dollars to Springfield. Thank you.
Thank you. Victor Davila.
Thank you, Mr. President, councilors. Good evening to all of you. My name is Victor Davila, and I live in Forest Park in Ward 6, and I come to you today to speak on item 13 of the agenda in front of you. Councilors, I'm extremely concerned with the way that City Hall has been responding to South Congregational Church decisions to provide sanctuary to Ms. Giselle Collazo. In my opinion, the approach is of that using a sledgehammer on a very sensitive and delicate issue. I am not going to address directly whether or not you think that Ms. Collazo should stay here in the United States. I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions about that. However, what I will say on that issue is that Ms. Collazo is fighting like a lioness to stay with her family. And I believe that we need more parents like Ms. Collazo here in the city of Springfield and in our country to make better citizens. Mr. President, I am deeply concerned with what appears to me as the bully tactics that are being used. A very dangerous precedent has already been set. A judge signed a warrant to go into a church. Very dangerous, my friends. In my ward, I can think of 6 different churches in Forest Park in Ward 6. What is going to be City Hall's reaction if those churches now start living their faith, continue to live their faith, and open their doors to offer sanctuary to other people? Is City Hall going to react the same way, and are they going to send everybody and their mother to harass them? I hope not. Councilors, you will have an order today sponsored by Councilor Ryan and co-sponsored by many of you. And to those of you, I thank you for stepping up and publicly thank Mr. Councilor Ryan for having the political courage to do what is right. Councilors, I ask you to support this order. I ask you to protect South Congregational Church's constitutional right to freely practice its faith. I ask you to support this order. And councilors, please pardon my French, but not supporting this order will be nothing but political cowardice. Thank you and good evening.
Linda O'Connell.
Good evening, everyone. Council President Ramos, esteemed city councilors, I rise to speak tonight to the matter before the council regarding the Peruvian woman currently receiving sanctuary from deportation at Springfield South Church. As a matter of good government, the League is critical of any attempt to use the mechanisms of city government to support personal political agenda of any elected official. Now, American citizens hold many views on appropriate immigration policy, which is the exclusive purview of the federal government, and our national debate over immigration policy is ongoing. The position of the League of Women Voters of the United States includes the belief that immigration policies should be responsive to those facing humanitarian crises and should promote, not stand in the way of the reunification of families. And while immigration policy reforms, including a path to legal status, remain unachieved, the League does not support deporting unauthorized immigrants who have no history of criminal activity. The League also defends the protections of the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts for the free exercise of religion. We expect our public officials to uphold these rights. So I, Linda O'Connell, convener of the League of Women Voters of Springfield, and the League applaud the Council for focusing attention on Springfield's relationship to the undocumented immigrants in our city. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is no stranger to this chamber. He was a member of this body for almost 3 decades. Mr. Bill Foley.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and members of the City Council. Thank you so much for your work here. As I often said, this is the toughest job in politics, and we really appreciate your service. I'm also very heartened by the number of people who are here tonight to speak out on the issues. I'm often haunted by the words of the English historian Arnold Toynbee, who said, "Many of the great societies died from within. There were no bands playing, no flags waving, just silence." And that's not going to happen here. Thank you. Before you tonight, you have a skillfully crafted order which says that based on mass law and religious tradition, churches have a right to provide sanctuary to people such as Mrs. Collazo, and therefore any city employee who interferes will face some form of unstated retribution, even if they are just doing their job. On the other hand, there is an ordinance which basically says that no person can live in a church, and if an employee is ordered to take a non-threatening action and refuses, they will face retribution by the mayor. Once again, hardworking, unassuming city employees are pawns in a political fight. This is not fair. Sponsors of this order are advocating the rights of Mrs. Collazo and have also been outspoken for the rights of the poor, homeless, and social justice. Shouldn't you also be compassionate to your employees? They also deserve to be treated with respect. We also risk the best and the brightest of our employees moving to other towns who provide a more stable atmosphere. As all of you are keenly aware, or you wouldn't be here, city employees, their families, former employees, and friends and constituents constitute, the largest voting bloc in the city. Don't paint yourself into a corner that forces to make you an unpopular action as calling for an employee to be fired or reprimanded for doing his job, his or her job. Also, as I said, this order states that based on mass law and religious tradition, everyone has the legal right to worship, and then deduces from that, if I read it correctly, that there a place of worship has a legal right to provide sanctuary. I'm not sure the two follow each other, and if you take action against an employee, you better be right. Taxpayers do not like lawsuits that mean more money out of their pocket. I urge you to please keep this discussion where it belongs, between the mayor and the city council. To me, this seems like a more peaceful solution, one that doesn't hurt innocent people. Finally, let me say that Mrs. Colasso is now at South Congregational Church, and unfortunately, we have no idea how long she'll have to stay there. And that's bad, that she can't be in her home, she can't be with her husband. I think it's important that we focus more on trying to get her out of there, to help her get out of her legal issues, and also to provide her a way, now that she is not hiding in the shadows, of becoming a citizen of the United States. Thank you very much.
Russell Seelig.
Good evening, councilors. My name is Russell Seelig. I live on Oxford Street in Springfield. I'm here to talk about a favorite subject. This is about the failure of the Board of Assessors to assess an additional penalty for the next ensuing tax year for those investment properties who do not respond to Information Request 38Ds. The only stipulation in the law being that the property owners ahead of time have been notified that they will be assessed a penalty if they don't respond. My thanks to the General Government Committee for having this on the agenda on March the 12th, at which the city solicitor and the chairman of the Board of Assessors were present. They both refused to discuss the issue, saying only that the matter needed to be discussed in an executive session. The reason for my being here tonight is to encourage the scheduling of said executive session. I've been in touch with a number of other communities across the Commonwealth and find the communities as diverse as Boston, Barnstable, Brookline, Chicopee, Upton, all do the enactment of the penalties for the non-responders. They do it because it is the law. They also do it because they want the information that will be encouraged from those owners if the penalties are enacted. And no matter the interpretation from our city solicitor about the word shall that is in the legislation, most of us common folk see shall as an imperative. So I believe that there is an alternative dictionary floating about here somewhere with convenient fake news that puts forth that shall is not an imperative. The market approach is the gold standard that's used for our single-family residences for their valuation. For investment properties, there are very few valid comparable sales, and then the income approach must be used. In fact, that is what the Department of Revenue strongly advises. The Information Request 38Ds are designed to put investment property incomes into the hands of the assessors so they can accurately value those properties. Assessing penalties against non-responders is designed into the legislation to encourage those non-responders to provide that vital information. It is now time to look at what the assessors plan to do for fiscal year 2019. They can disregard the law as they have done in the past, or they can adhere to the law and reap the benefits for all the taxpayers of the city. So once again, this is to encourage the scheduling of the necessary executive session to determine the path the assessors will take. Are there any questions? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. The final speaker of the evening is Reverend Tom Gerstenlauer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a prepared statement, and if the council would like, I have copies to distribute amongst them. I am Reverend Tom Gerstenlauer, and I serve as the lead minister for South Congregational United Church of Christ. I appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. I know you are all aware that on June 16th of last year, a coalition of religious communities and service organizations declared that they had organized to offer sanctuary to undocumented immigrants who were at risk of detention or deportation from the place in which they had made their home. The motivation for our declaration and our preparations was and remains our shared values for love of neighbor and hospitality to the stranger among us. As a coalition of religious organizations with shared core values, our purpose is an exercise of faith. I believe that these core values are shared more broadly still. At what has served as a gateway to our nation for over a century, the Statue of Liberty stands with its declaration, "Give me, your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door." Somebody saw fit to post this notice at the base of the new Colossus. It seems clear that these words express the same shared values as those the Springfield Interfaith Sanctuary Coalition is exercising here among the masses assembled in Springfield. Today, I bring you another notice of an inspection appointed some 2,000 years ago. It is in the form of a familiar passage from the Gospel of Matthew, delivered by a radical rabbi who taught during a period dominated by an earthly empire that eventually fell to its timeless judgment. "You that are accursed, depart from me into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me. Naked, and you did not give me clothing. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me." The image offered by the rabbi was of the separation of sheep and goats, that is, those who follow the core faith values and those who stray from them. The penalty is severe, to be sure, and I continue to pray for the souls of those who do not pay heed and make amends. We people of faith are equally challenged to live according to the values we claim. Yet we must, in all humility, fulfill our commitment to the values of love for neighbor and hospitality to the stranger among us through our actions. You, all of you, are invited to join us as we form a community of welcome and of light. There is no requirement that you swear allegiance to any higher power in particular, but only that you acknowledge these shared values and come to express them through your actions. Thank you.
All right, that concludes our public speak out for tonight. We will now begin our regular meeting. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Councilor Williams. Present. Councilor Twiggs. Here. Councilor Shea.
Present.
Present. Councilor Gomez.
Present.
Present. Councilor Walsh.
Here.
Here. Councilor Fenton. Present. Councilor Letterman. Present. Councilor Edwards.
Present.
Present. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Here. Councilor Hurst. Absent. Councilor Ryan.
Got the tail
Here.
end of it.
Councilor Allen. Present. Councilor Ramos.
Present. If everyone could please rise and join me in a moment of silence. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Councilor Ryan.
Will we take item 13 out of order?
There's a motion to take item number 13 out of order, Mr. Clerk, without objection.
Item 13 is an order regarding the South Church Sanctuary Mission, sponsored by Councilor Ryan and 6 other councilors.
Councilor Ryan.
Mr. President, thank you. Mr. President, we're here on an issue that is at the fundamental foundation of this country, and that is the freedom of religion, the free exercise of religion, and the right of religious organizations to be the conscience of us all. First church across the street behind our back, I mean, that dates back to the founding, and we have here tonight members of many different faiths, many different congregations. We have Reverend from South Church who just spoke. We have several deacons. We have Sisters of St. Joseph, all here joining us on this issue. The church, these churches, the Springfield Interfaith Coalition, when they are providing sanctuary, they are expressing, they are fulfilling their religious mission. It's so fundamental. And what they have done by coming together and providing sanctuary for this unfortunate young lady is 100% within their religious views, within their religious mission. This country would be much, much poorer if we didn't have the great help, the great assistance of the religious. Just last week, Councilor Gomez and I were next door with the mayor and to mark the event led by much of the clergy, the 50 years of the assassination of Dr. King. But the purpose of tonight's order is to express the fundamental right, the fundamental freedom of these churches, of these religious, to continue to provide this support, to continue to provide this help. And you don't have to agree with it, but fundamentally we can't infringe it. And I hope that the sense of this council, the overwhelming support of this council, will be to pass this order.
Councilor Shea.
If I may, first off, it's a pleasure to have such a large crowd here, such a well-behaved crowd. And I guess I want to start my comments with, we could get by without government, but we could never get by without religion. Society will function pretty well if we didn't have a government in the way, but it will never function well if we don't have religious organizations. And in spite of what you may have seen in the paper and misinterpreted in comments, I am 100% in support of this resolution. There is no more fundamental right, as has been expressed tonight by the speakers and by Councilor Ryan and probably others tonight, of a religious organization to provide safety, to provide a haven, and to provide refuge or a sanctuary for those stressed in any way. And the only point that I want to make, and that I have a small issue with the resolution, is the very last paragraph, and that's because it does draw in, as former Councilor Foley mentioned, employees and the issue of having to occasionally spend money. There are legitimate concerns, as we saw, when the city has to make sure that an institution or place is safe to go to, and then that would require some expensive funds. So I am going to propose through a motion that the wording in the last paragraph be changed, and I'm going to read it. And it's simply, if you have the old one in front of you, you could see it, but it's simply going to say that, now therefore, be it ordered that the city of Springfield shall not interfere with South Church or any church in the Springfield Interfaith Coalition in carrying out its religious convictions and providing sanctuary. That's to the point, that's to the issue, that's exactly what we need to have on the record, and that's what we want the regulation, the law in this society here in Springfield, and we would hope across the country to be. So I would make that change as a motion, Mr. President.
I will second that motion.
Motion made by Councilor Shea, seconded by Councilor Walsh. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. President.
Councilor Twiggs.
I've heard some excellent speeches here tonight with respect to the sanctuary and this church that will provide leadership for probably hundreds of years. I didn't look up how long that church has been here, but it has served the people of Springfield for a number of years. And I for one, have thought that the President of the United States is creating a very disharming problem for cities and states to operate with his attitude toward immigrants. And I asked myself, what would Dr. Martin Luther King do in this situation? And I've come to the conclusion that he would be supporting it. And on the basis of that, I will be supporting it too, and I ask all councilors to support it.
Councilor Williams on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I sat with this order for some time, prayed on it, for sure. And I'd like to commend the councilors that did take a stand to address this issue head on. Now, growing up, I attended Solid Rock Community Baptist Church, a church that in this community that many of you might know, and hearing countless teachings and testimonies from congregation members and the pastor and all those that attended. One thing that I took away that I will always take with me is the fact that I was taught at a very early age that you should fear no man. But there is an entity that you should fear, and that's God. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And I know that God is a person, an entity that reaps compassion, and that is, if you believe, something that's also supposed to encompass the way you look at the world and the way you look at each other. And I know as well that Councilor Twiggs, you might have asked, what would Martin Luther King do? But I asked, what would Jesus do? And I believe that if you know his teachings and you've heard his teachings through the years, you know that Jesus would be a person who would not turn his eye or his love astray, exactly, in terms of people that are in need and need a place to go and that are facing deportation or what have you. I'm concerned. I'm concerned in this city, and the reason I am concerned is because I hear rhetoric coming from this administration, and I'm not talking about the President of the United States, I'm talking about the mayor of Springfield, that is very similar to that of the President of the United States, and it scares me because we have no room left to not allow for empathy. The ability to say to someone, I might not have gone through what you've gone through, but I can relate. Where has that gone? If you don't have that key core skill or quality, then I don't believe you should lead. So, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening. This issue is important, but every issue that comes before this council is important, and I wish that every meeting was full to capacity as this one is today. But I do thank your efforts, and I thank your energy behind this, because I think it's when you look at the national landscape, this issue is certainly important on a local level. And I do intend to support this ordinance, and I hope that my colleagues do as well. Thank you.
Councilor Walsh.
I'm quite surprised that...
I'm sorry, council rules don't allow for public input at this point.
First Amendment.
No, I'm sorry, council rules do not allow for public input at this point.
For those of us who disagree with others, what are we doing?
Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. You were wrong. And I would like to thank Councilor Shea for addressing this last paragraph, because I have to say that I found this resolution or order quite troubling. I'm troubled by the fact that a mother would be separated from her children. That's something we do not want to see. But I was very concerned about the order affecting our city employees, what they can and cannot do, and what the mayor of the city can do when he's looking out for the safety of the city. And I thought that the last paragraph, as it was stated before Councilor Shea amended it, really was beyond the scope of what the city council can do, because certainly I wouldn't want to support anything that tells city employees you cannot do your job. And to me, that's what you were asking. You were also asking the mayor not to do his job, whether you agree with it or not. And people might not agree, but isn't that what we're all here about today, that everybody can have an opinion? So even if you don't agree with it, it is part of America. Everybody can have their own agreement. So I'm very happy that the language is going to be struck. And I want a clarification of what it is we're actually being asked to do with this proclamation. Actually, it's an order, correct?
It's an order.
It's an order. So are we simply being asked to say that churches have freedom of speech, that churches have a mission? Is that what we're being asked, or is there something else here?
Mr. Clerk, can you read the motion into the record one more time?
Well,
So the order has not been amended yet. The amendment is before the body, and the amendment sponsored by Councilor Shea states, "Now therefore be it," and this amends the last paragraph of the order, and it states, "Now therefore be it ordered that the city of Springfield shall not interfere with the South Church or any other church in the Springfield Interfaith Coalition in carrying out its religious convictions and providing sanctuary."
Well, I mean, America is a place where there's a history of religious tradition, and sanctuary goes back to the Middle Ages. So as long as we are not being asked to interfere with city employees and what our responsibility is as city councilors to all citizens in the city of Springfield and all taxpayers, because I have to tell you, the reaction to this that I've gotten is very mixed. Some people are for it, some people are against it, and of course everybody has the right to to their opinions. I do think that there's one other phrase that bothers me, and I think there needs to be a clarification that the coalition will provide sanctuary to any other individual. What does that mean? I want a clarification of what that actually means. We're not talking about anybody. We're talking about people who haven't committed crimes. Is that correct? I mean, I think that needs to be clarified. I think it's very vague and very broad.
Right, so
and I'd like to ask, I don't know if the city solicitor is here or our attorney is here, but I also would like a clarification of what authority the city council has in telling any church what to do.
Councilor Ryan.
I'm not sure what the second question was, and but there's nothing in here that tells a church what it can do. It's telling the city that we shall not interfere with a church in the exercise and the practice of its religious mission. That's the intent, that's the purpose, that's the language of this order, is to say that we, the city, in the exercise of our governmental functions, are not going to interfere, intimidate with their exercise, and it's a very fundamental right.
Well, I would think that would be a given, and I don't know why it's been blown up like this, and our inspectors did go into South Congregational Church. They did what they had to do, and to me, I think everything should be over except for the fact that we hope there will be a positive outcome for this family. So I would like to know what role the city council has, from our attorney, in telling churches what they can or cannot do. I think it's beyond the scope of our responsibilities.
I'm sorry, but I do need you to clarify, because the way I'm listening, if I'm listening to Councilor Ryan the correct way, it's that the purpose of the order is not to direct what the churches are allowed and are not allowed to do. Of course, the council doesn't have any authority to tell the churches what to do and what not to do.
Right. Well, that's what I thought, so.
Councilor Ash and then Councilor Gomez.
Councilor Shea and Walsh.
Oh, I didn't get an answer to any other individuals.
Concern around the wording. Certainly from my standpoint, and I think we share it in this council, overstepping its bounds and directing employees what they can and cannot do. So I'm satisfied that if that language is struck from this order, then I'm okay with it. But I have great concerns that, time and again, it seems like this council oversteps its bounds and gets into another arena where it ought not be in terms of directing employees and getting involved in personnel items and so on. So I'm very, very concerned with that. But if it's the will of this body to strike that into a more tenable tone, then I, for one, am willing to support it. And in a broader way, I hope that our concerns and our comments are taken for what they are. It's concern as elected officials of the city and looking out for the best interests of all. I hope, as I know everyone in this council does and everyone in this chamber does, that this woman is reunited with her family and everything goes back to normal. And I hope that in a larger way that our leaders in Washington can work in a bipartisan way to solve these problems so that city councils in Springfield and Boston and wherever else don't have to deal with these issues that they ought not be dealing with. So again, my concern was around the language, around how we direct the employees what they can and cannot do. And if that's struck, then I'm okay with supporting this.
Councilor Gomez on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this is specifically on the motion. Can you reread again the amended language? Well, it's not amended yet. I just want for you to clarify before I begin.
The amendment, which will be to the last paragraph of the order, states, "Now therefore be it ordered that the city of Springfield shall not interfere with the South Church or any other church in the Springfield Interfaith Sanctuary Coalition in carrying out its religious convictions and providing sanctuary.
If there's no objection, can we add from churches for places of worship? I believe, and I just want to discuss it. The reason why I say that is because this council is not only under one type of faith. There's different faiths that come to this conversation that apply sanctuary. There could be synagogues, there could be mosques, and all of them collectively together should be part of this conversation because moving forward, religious freedom is part of what this order is about. I don't think that this body and this language states anything of the sort that we're telling a church what to do. What we're trying to accomplish with this order is stating that we don't want to tell the church what to do. We want them to be able to practice under their mission and under their constitutional right. And where this came from was the fact that we're fighting over language, but we're really honestly standing in solidarity with the pig language that was coming from different people. And I apologize and I excuse my tongue, but realistically it comes to a time that in a place where we need to stand up to people that, you know, consistently say foul things about different people, different groups in our community. And in essence, when it's time for election time, you guys come to my community, come to their communities, and exactly want our support. And come to this religious freedom when it comes down to, I've been working with this community and this coalition since I've been elected and before I've been elected. I still have my sticker here that I am with Lucio, I am with Gisela, I am with the Russian woman right now. This is not just about a Latino thing. This is happening to like I always state, there's different people from different backgrounds that are going through this path of citizenship that is not easy. The next day after, which was the greatest thing that I've seen that nobody's talking about, is that at Winnick, League of Women's Voters were over there registering newly people that were sworn into citizenship. You know, there's people actively working that want to become citizens. I think that's not the question, and we tote that line that we're passing the buck or we're trying to fit the bill for some of these individuals, specifically talking about Gisela and this order, is the fact that she was working and that her kids are American citizens. So essentially when they said, oh, we have to clothe her and we have to worry about her health care, some of these immigrants can't even, if it wasn't for the Cliniquita or some places that would be able to see them, those are the situations that we're at hand. Some of these people are running because it's worse off from where they came from, and this is the promised land. And essentially, I just want to read this just really quickly so we can move on. And it's Leviticus 19. Any immigrant who lives with you must be treated as if they were one of your citizens. You must love them as yourself because you were immigrants in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. And no longer will I listen or abide by Pharaoh. And you know exactly who I'm talking about. This is not a dictatorship. This is a democracy. And at the end of the day, yes, there's laws. And you had brought up, you want to make sure that they're not protecting criminals. Essentially, the positive part about this is I don't think anybody part of this coalition is in favor of protecting and ever has protected somebody that has been convicted of any drug charges, convicted of any violent acts, convicted of any strong felonies. So we need to leave that kind of language when we're talking about some of these individuals, because these individuals come here and are part of a family, they're part of church, they want to live here, some of them want to go home, but they can't. So essentially, we have to try to live amongst each other and figure out what we need to do. And like you said, a lot of you guys had said, it oversteps the boundaries of the city council. You know what? You're absolutely right. So essentially, I say our state delegation and going forward to our federal delegation, like Councilor Ash stated, this is not the job of the mayor. This is not his job. His job is to make sure our citizens and our residents and our public safety, you guys unanimously passed on June 5th, 2017, a resolution, Safe Communities, Springfield Safe Communities Act, and we sent it back on May Day, on May 5th, and we came back and you agreed with it. So if we have already some type of language that we're not a sanctuary city, but we're a practicing welcoming city because it's all about language and how we interpret it, I appreciate that all of you can, in respect, see the promised land and see over the mountaintop and see that these folks look towards us. And I say again because somebody made a video of it and they said that I was trying to create more voters. And you know what? I am. You know why? I'm trying to encourage people that aren't registered to vote to get involved, because if you looked at the Boston Globe, 12,000 people make decisions in the city of Springfield. 100,000 people, over 100,000 people are registered to vote. So you know what? This is a call to action to my religious folks and my friends out in the crowd and everybody that's listening. If there's an issue and there's something going on, God bless you, brother. Go out and door knock. Go out and get involved in your communities. Go out, get involved with your neighborhood boards and your organizations. Because not only this topic is hot and heated, there's plenty of stuff on this agenda that is going to move and shape the new Springfield. So if we want to be a part of what's really going on and what's happening in the new Springfield, let's stop playing in division. Let's start having communications, and let's stop letting media drive us apart, when in the end of the day, we still have to move government forward. And the most important thing is we have to worry about kids and families. This woman gets deported. Let's say she wasn't married and she had her kids that were born here. What happens? Those kids live into the system, and everybody understands what happens when you get put into the system and how they come, what's the problems with that. We already have kids that live in our country already, that go through dramatic stuff, that are in the system. So essentially, why do we want to pull families apart with what's the most important part in the kid's life is their mother and their father? And you might not like it, but
Councilor Shea.
I think that Councilor Gomez's wording in there is perfectly fine and acceptable and probably should be in there.
Okay. Would you like to clarify what the amended motion would be?
just the amended motion stating that it's not just churches but places of worship.
And so it would be to replace the word churches with
Churches, when it says sanctuary church, not sanctuary, South Congregational Church and other places of worship.
and other places of worship. So is that your amended motion, Councilor Shea?
Yes, that gets across the meaning. I think that, legally church and place of worship is one and the same, but I want to make sure there's no doubt. So we will put in place of worship in, fine.
Okay. Amended.
So, just to clarify your restated amendment, it should now state, now therefore be it ordered that the city of Springfield shall not interfere with the South Church or any other place of worship in the Springfield Interfaith
And the Springfield Interfaith.
and
Because that's a separate entity.
and the
which
Springfield
probably includes,
Interfaith Sanctuary Coalition in carrying out its religious convictions and providing sanctuary.
Right.
Okay.
That motion was seconded by Councilor Williams. Anyone else on the motion? Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Echoing what Councilor Williams said earlier, there's a lot of times we're here and there's 10 people in the audience, and maybe some of the things we talk about aren't as compelling as this tonight, but it feels like there's a city here tonight, and it feels like people were engaged, many of us, on the same issue, on the same side of the issue. So it was different when we stood here, 6 of us, a week ago last Thursday, and it looked like there was only 6 of us. It's only because press conferences are called, and we don't take attendance as to who can make it. There were more people, I believe, in support of this motion than the 6 of us who were just there at that point. So I thank everybody for coming. It's good to feel part of something in which many people, on both sides of this railing here, are on the same side of the issue. Thank you.
Councilor Letterman. Councilor Ryan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in support of the order before us and also in support of the motions that I believe make the order stronger. I reflected a lot on what to say as I drove here this evening and throughout my workday. I spoke with a number of folks who I trust to give counsel on things like this, because we're dealing today with some extraordinarily impactful issues. We're dealing with an order and an issue that's played out in our community over the last several weeks, whose final, wherever we arrive, impacts a woman's life, impacts 2 children's lives, a family in the city of Springfield, individuals who are our constituents. And I'm deeply moved by the support that we've seen here this evening for this order, by the phone calls and emails that we've received in support of this order and in support of Gisela. I'm moved by the number of clergy that have been in contact with me this week in support of this order. I said when we stood here last week to declare that we would be introducing this order, that our nation is and always has been one built by immigrants who come to the United States seeking a better life for the future of their families. And that during our country's over 2 centuries of history, many of our ancestors could have been considered illegal by present and past measure. I want to be clear about what we're doing here today. We are passing an order that respects South Congregational Church's religious right to practice sanctuary, a practice that's recognized by the federal government, a practice that is recognized by Immigration and Customs Enforcement. What we are saying is that we are not going to use city resources, leverage the city's might, to carry out actions that are politically motivated. I think that that is the right thing to do, and I think that it's a courageous thing to do. We are not voting to discipline city employees. We are not telling anyone to break the law. We're voting to uphold the law and the constitutional freedoms of South Congregational Church. We've heard a lot about Dr. Martin Luther King here this evening. And last week, we recognized the tragic 50th anniversary of his assassination. Dr. King, the day before he was assassinated, gave a speech in which he expressed frustration with courts and elected officials who stood in the way of the civil rights movement. And he channeled the crowd that was there by saying that it's true. There's difficult days ahead for that movement. There's difficult days ahead. And it's today. It's difficult days when we were standing holding a press conference during Holy Week to declare that we didn't want our city to use its municipal resources to knock down the door of a church for politically motivated reasons. So it's difficult days ahead. But Dr. King also said that he believed ultimately the movement would succeed, and that drove him forward. It drove colleagues of ours like Councilor Twiggs forward, mentors of ours like Representative Swan forward. We have the hindsight of looking back on history and seeing the mistakes that governments made, the mistakes that man made. When mine and Amelia's grandchildren ask me decades from now what we did in these difficult days, I want to be able to tell them that our city council, that our colleagues leveraged the full legislative might of the city of Springfield to stand with our religious institutions, to bridge politics, to do what might be difficult, but what is truly just and morally right. That's what our order here stands to do. And I'm so proud that it seems that we may be fully united in this effort. I urge us to continue forward, to pass this order tonight, hopefully unanimously, and take a stand. Take a stand, because people will be looking back on this day, and we want to be on the right side of history. Thank you.
Councilor Ryan.
Mr. President, on Councilor Shea's motion, you have to give way to his wisdom and experience, but no, it's spot on. And the wording and the phrasing is great, and I certainly support it. And before I sit, I just want to acknowledge the people here who are day in, day out laboring in the vineyard, providing for the poor, the neglected, the forgotten, those who faced deportation, to the men and women of the Interfaith Coalition for all the work you do. Thank you very much.
Councilor Edwards.
I'm going to be very brief, and I just want to say that it shouldn't be difficult to do the right thing. And to me, this is not difficult. It is just the right thing to do. So I stand in support of both the order and the amendment as has been proposed. And I don't feel like this should be considered something hard, difficult to do. It's just the right thing to do.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleagues have eloquently highlighted a lot of the merits of this, so I won't be repetitive. I should say that if there was ever a question as to whether or not I find myself on the right side of the issue, and two former principals of Cathedral High School that that were there at a time when I served would give me a pretty good indication of where I should be. I'm supportive of this order. I'm supportive of the amendment. I just want to highlight one point that I don't think has been intentionally missed by the other people here tonight, but it is really the reason we're here. And there was talk about council overreach. There's talk about federal law, about municipal law, about state law. We're really here because of the executive branch's overreach in this subject. And I just want to highlight exactly what started that overreach. The press release reads, Mayor Sarno issues statement on South Congregational Church's defiance in recruitment of a sanctuary city. Well, the recruitment efforts have paid off for them in defiance of the edict that we are not a sanctuary city. Now, that's why we're here. No mayor passes any edict telling any church what to do, particularly as it relates to sanctuary. The issue is just quite plainly that simple, and there were a plethora of press releases that followed. We're going to inspect, we're going to strip your tax status, we're going to do all these other things. You pass the inspections with flying colors. And the one thing that I do want to highlight and make sure that we keep our eye on here, because the administration has walked back a lot of these comments and positions. Guess that's what the Boston Globe will do. But the with respect to the tax issue, I want this body and I want the people in this chamber to remain vigilant, because the language that was used was very strong, and it said we're going to strip and instruct the Board of Assessors to evaluate their tax-exempt status. I said it at the press conference with some of my colleagues when we were here last week announcing this order, to suggest that a church which enjoys the benefit of a property tax exemption by virtue of state law protecting that use, that religious and charitable use, as being exempt from municipal property taxation, saying that this church is somehow less charitable than it was before it allowed this woman and her family to take sanctuary is absurd. And so I want to make sure that this body continues to shed light on this issue, and we continue to put pressure on the administration to expressly also walk back that statement about their tax status, because it is a very scary statement, and it does raise a variety of issues, not the least of which is separation of church and state.
Councilor Twiggs. There's a motion on the floor to amend the language on the order. We will vote on that motion first. That requires a voice vote. And so if there's no further discussion on the motion for the amended language, all in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Is there any further discussion before we vote? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On approving the order regarding South Church. Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs. Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton. Yes. Yes, Councilor Letterman. Yes. Yes, Councilor Edwards. Yes. Yes, Councilor Ash. Yes, Councilor Hurst. Absent, Councilor Ryan.
The clerk please recognize Councilor in seat number 10.
Councilor Hurst.
Present. Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes, Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Order is approved. We'll take a brief recess, and we'll be back in a few minutes. The council and the guests will please take their seats. We have a fairly long agenda ahead of us tonight.
This was to explain the proposal to use $100,000 for free cash. Mr. Sullivan from Economic Development Council, and he explained that if we do that, we could leverage up to an additional $400,000 in cash contributions, as well as up to $400,000 to $500,000 in in-kind contributions from the media partners. So the committee approved it, and it's back here tonight for review, and I'd ask that we take it out of order so that Mr. Sullivan could return to his home after this is resolved.
If there is no objection, item number 24, Mr. Clerk. Councilor Letterman. Okay. So if there's, is there anything further on the committee?
Not on that, no.
All right. All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Any other reports of committee? Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening, the Maintenance and Development Subcommittee met, and Councilors Walsh, Gomez, Letterman, Fenton, Shea, and were present. The purpose of this meeting was to first discuss the order of taking of land easements for the Six Corners traffic improvements, as well as the appropriation for the order of the taking of damages for the Six Corners, the same project, in the amount of $508,530. The subcommittee voted to approve these two orders, and that is at will, of course, of the council. But in terms of the two properties that we'll be taking, it's first a gas station that's adjacent to this area, as well as a multifamily home which has 2 units. All tenants have been are in the knowing of what's going on regarding this taking, and there have been full appraisals as well as review appraisals for those properties. The duration of this project is to, in terms of how long it will take to complete, is 1 construction season, and of course new sidewalks and roads will be implemented, and there's been talks with the tenants of that 2-unit development in terms of helping them relocate in the city. There's a relocation assistance plan where the tenants have, after the 4 months that it takes for them to get out of the property, where they'll be helped financially in terms of their moving expenses and reimbursed by the city to help them find another place to live. So again, the order was recommended by the subcommittee. I chair that, as well as Gomez and Letterman councilors. They were in attendance to vote that up as well. Thank you.
All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Any other reports of committee? Councilor Edwards.
On March 21st, the Government Committee held a meeting on 2 subjects. One was the diversity officer that was proposed by my colleague Marcus Williams. We did not have quorum. In fact, I was the only counselor that was a member of the committee at present, but Counselor Letterman was in attendance, and I believe Counselor Gomez also was there as well. Because of the lack of quorum, the meeting was for informational purposes only. We had some discussion. We came to no real conclusion, and it was nothing to vote on. It was just a sharing of information, and as such, I've since had conversations with at least one of my other colleagues who has some other questions, and at the appropriate time, I believe he will make a motion that that item be returned back to committee for further discussions to alleviate and answer some questions of some members of this committee, our council, who were not in attendance and may have some further conversations necessary to come to the conclusion of support. The other item that was discussed, was spoken of tonight, is a part of the public speak out, and it related to the 38D and the evaluation or notice of evaluations that were put forth and discussed on numerous occasions by Mr. Russell Seelig. I believe at the last regular council meeting he had spoke out on this issue, and it was more at the public speak out. Toward the end of our regular council meeting, the issue came back up. He was not present to answer any questions or add anything to the discussion, but it was suggested by one of my colleagues that we as a council may want to send a letter to the assessor inquiring about the issue of shall versus may, and asking for an explanation of why we would not be supportive or would not want him to actually send these letters out. Mr. Pakula and the assessor were at the general government meeting on the 21st, as was Mr. Seelig, and at that time it was at their recommendation that they would be available to discuss this issue generally, but not in any great detail, because it might be construed as part of work because of the threat of a pending lawsuit and some of the connection to an existing lawsuit around an issue similarly around the issue of assessments. So it's the will of this council if they want more details, and in fact, I believe if Mr. Pakula is here, he might be able to explain what his, or kind of restate the comments he made at the General Government Committee, if that be the will of my colleagues to hear his explanation on that part of it. But his recommendation, if we want details of the explanation of why the assessor is not willing to talk about it publicly, we would have to go in executive session. So, and if there's, if any of you would like to hear from him, that is...
It's up to you, Councilor, if you would like to yield your time for...
if there's no objections, I'd like to call Ed to come forward just so that he can kind of restate what he said to the general government. Because of the lack of quorum and because there was lack of attendance by my colleagues, I think it might be interesting to hear what his thoughts were, and then at that time he can kind of give you some more clarity as to that one specific subject. Mr. Pakula, please. Hi, sir. I understand, and you don't have to be apologized for being busy. I certainly appreciate it. The General Government Committee that we had, Russ Seelig had attended, he brought up the subject of the 38D, question of shall versus may, and if you would be so kind as to kind of explain why we could not get into more detailed discussion for fear of work product.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So the mayor received a letter from Mr. Seelig threatening litigation. He said people were lining up to join a lawsuit to sue the city over our policies with regard to 38D. The mayor asked that I send a response, and I did, explaining our position from a public perspective. I attended the meeting, and I indicated I would be happy to discuss the letter and the notion of shall versus may. When is shall an imperative, and when is shall not an imperative. So that's the legal issue, and I'll be happy to talk about the rules of statutory construction that apply. But that's not something I'm going to talk about in open session when I'm telling the people are lining up to sue us. That's something that is more properly the subject of an executive session, and I'd be happy to go into executive session to do that. I know you don't have an executive session on tonight. If you'd like to talk about this another time, I'll be happy to come back for an executive session. And I would do that in committee if we had, but I don't think we had a quorum, and that wasn't, an executive session wasn't on the agenda for that either.
Correct.
So that's the situation in a nutshell. I think I sent a copy of the letter that went to Mr. Seelig. So you should all have that.
Thank you, sir. Colleagues.
Does that conclude your committee report?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All in favor of accepting the report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Any other committee reports? Councilor Letterman.
April 2nd, we held a Health and Human Services Committee meeting. We did not have a quorum. I was the only committee member present, so this was for informational purposes. This meeting was a follow-up to the Maintenance and Development Committee meeting that was held with PVTA. In attendance at our meeting was to focus on the impact of the proposed service cuts and fare increase, which have now become today reality, on the senior population of the city of Springfield. We had with us Sandra Sheehan, the director of the PVTA. We also had our commissioner, Helen Colton-Harris, and as well as our Elder Affairs Director, Sandy Federico. We were also joined by several members of the Massachusetts Senior Action Council who expressed really deep concern about the impact to the services that PVTA provides to senior citizens in our community. The fare increase that was approved today and that was under consideration at that time of 20 to 25% will also impact all of the services, including paratransit, that the seniors in our community take advantage of on a regular basis. They are also proposing to end rides to and from adult daycare institutions as another part of the cuts. And so later on this evening, myself and several councilors have a resolution urging our state delegation to increase the line item funding for regional transit authorities, and we'll cover more of the details at that time.
All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Any other reports of committee? Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. March 28th, the Casino Oversight Committee met. Apologize that I don't have the attendance list of who was there at the meeting. The intent was to discuss a few outstanding issues that we have as we're getting closer and closer to a grand opening that everybody's excited about. They have determined final locations, I understand, for the designated smoking areas. Discussed that. Discussed my desire for some updates regarding the potential for valet parking on Main Street, and that is an ongoing discussion with MGM, the Springfield Parking Authority, and the Law Department. And we also discussed the Elm Street project. As a result of the discussion about the to put a wrap on that, the valet parking will meet again, and we'll talk about whether or not that's a viable alternative. I expect we'll do that at some point in later April or early May. And then the other issue regarding Elm Street, we did get a brief update from Attorney Moore and Mr. Moskal from the SRA, and it was their expectation that Opal Commercial Real Estate Development Company and WIN, W-I-N-N, not W-Y, would be providing an updated pro forma and financial statement to the SRA at their last meeting. In anticipation of that, I went to the meeting and we talked about the project and some of the frustrations that are starting to percolate regarding lack of certainty as to whether or not it's moving forward. And I expect to get some substantive updates from them at the next SRA meeting before the end of April, which I will also attend, and then I'll report back.
All in favor of accepting the committee report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. And Councilor Letterman.
Mr. Chairman, my apologies. I neglected to mention one final committee report. On March 28th, the Ad Hoc Green Committee met here in chambers. The vast majority of the appointed members were present. We were also briefly joined by Councilor Edwards. We received a presentation from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission on the state's recent LED streetlight conversion program that existed in the last year that many communities took advantage of. We also received a presentation on the benefits and downsides of LED streetlight conversion, as well as a presentation from Smith College professor, faculty member, who presented information about best practices around LED streetlight conversion. Of course, some of the issues that people are interested in doing these conversions is for streetlights to be better, for there to be better lighting, for there to be a reduced cost in terms of the electricity that we bring in. And so essentially we increase sustainability. We also, in an ideal situation, would see a cost savings for the city, but that's under certain circumstances. So the Green Committee did take a vote that they are interested in pursuing further investigation into this. We hope to schedule a meeting in the near future with our DPW director and relevant city staff around it. Again, very much in the information gathering stage, but one of the projects that the Green Committee is interested in looking further into.
All in favor of accepting the report say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Any other reports of committee? Councilor Ryan, did you have a motion? If there's no objection, Mr. Clerk.
24 is an order to transfer from free cash to the Economic Development Department $100,000.
Good evening.
President, council members, thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight, and thank Chairman Ryan and the committee. We had great attendance at that meeting for the opportunity to speak and explain this opportunity to you. I really think Councilor Ryan did a very great job in terms of explaining exactly what it is, so I would be happy to answer any questions. But in a nutshell, this is a campaign of a media campaign that my membership of the EDC, and for those that aren't familiar, it's about 80 companies, the biggest employers, the bigger companies in Western Massachusetts, the companies that really drive the Western Mass economy. They are all not necessarily Springfield based, but they are ones that are very interested, obviously, in the economy in general for Western Massachusetts. And they were excited and came together with the opportunity to leverage this investment that is proposed by the city of Springfield in terms of telling the story of Springfield, the good story of Springfield, the renaissance, if you will, of Springfield throughout the city. And I think it became clear at the meeting, at the subcommittee, that this is not just a downtown campaign. It will include the good things that are happening in the neighborhoods and the smaller businesses in Springfield, the cultural events that happen in and around the entire city of Springfield. And I made the offer to the subcommittee and offer to the larger body here, if there are events or good things that are happening in the neighborhoods or in other parts of Springfield other than the downtown, please let us know. We've worked closely with Brian Connors, and we're happy to include those, as it is an entire Springfield. This will not be a casino campaign, and I want to make that clear. There is no money from MGM in this campaign. We will not be looking for money from MGM. And in fact, I suspect that there will not be any advertising or marketing that will include MGM. They are very capable professionals that will do a great job of telling the story of MGM, of their opening and their ongoing marketing campaign and operations. So with that said, this is an opportunity to take the investment of the city of Springfield and multiply that. We have committed as an organization to raise $400,000 in cash, so that the total cash marketing campaign would be $500,000. And then the marketing partners of the EDC and any other advertising or marketing company that we would work with would have to match any investment there one-to-one, so that in the end, the entire campaign is a $1 million campaign. And to be clear, the media partners and members of the EDC are the Republican and Mass Live, Comcast, Channels 22, and Western Mass News. The campaign will undoubtedly include outlets outside of those, but again, any of those outside of that would also be looked to match on that one-to-one basis as well. MGM, while they will not contribute cash to this, and while they will not be the focus of the marketing campaign, I do also want to be clear that they have brought their international marketing team of McCann to the table. Free of charge. There will not be any dollars from this campaign that will go to either MGM or McCann, but the international experts there at McCann will help us put together exactly what the campaign will look like, what the print and what the digital and what the TV and radio, potentially outdoor advertising will look like, where that should be spent, how it should be spent. And again, primarily this market is focused on Springfield and would probably run from roughly Hartford to Worcester. And this will not be, you will not be seeing billboards in New York City. You will not be seeing, ad time bought on national news, probably local news, but the focus is internal to tell the story, to tell the really good story of all of the great things that are happening in the city of Springfield. And we're excited to that and quite frankly, excited to bring this opportunity to really take what is a proposed investment by the city and multiply that as much as tenfold. So with that, Councilor, Mr. President, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, good report. Just wondering when you'll have an initial plan and communicating with us as it goes along.
So we have been communicating back through Community Development and Brian Connors. There was certainly some discussion about having, a counselor working with him to have that report back as things evolve. We are certainly happy to do that. We expect that the campaign itself will be looking to be a fourth quarter 2018 campaign. You had asked me previous as well as at the subcommittee meeting. To date, we have either cash on hand or pledges, and again, you all know who my membership are, so they're good for the pledges, but we've got just around $325,000 in cash or pledges already. That does not include any money from the city. But to be clear, many of our partners that are contributing, are expecting that the city is going to be in, and if that didn't happen, there is not a guarantee that the campaign happens. But it's been a huge response from the business community in support of this.
That's great. It would just be great if we could get a written or verbal report back in a couple months to see how it's shaping up. And Councilor Gomez, I believe, is chair of the Economic Development Committee.
And we're happy to absolutely do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Councilor Williams.
I just have a question in regards to, I'm always a little, not maybe skeptical is too strong of a word, but in regards to raising money and dealing with pledges, uncommitted funds, if we were to allocate $100,000 today for money to be transferred from free cash to this campaign, and it just happens, God forbid, that people don't supply what they had initially intended to or just don't, what happens with that money? And maybe it's a question for TJ. I don't know if he's here tonight, but that's a question I do have. Let me take a stab at it.
It would be recaptured if it wasn't used.
Recaptured.
Yeah. And I'm happy to provide an accounting. We have not, nor will we go out and individually say which companies gave how much. We're really not looking to spot companies, right. But we are happy to provide an accounting and certainly understand that the public's entitled to an accounting of not only the Springfield money, but in this case, we'll be providing that same kind of reporting back to our members who have that same interest.
Well, no, I certainly appreciate the leverage, and I'll say finally, I think it's also important in making this campaign that it certainly encompasses all aspects of Springfield in its entirety, from different neighborhoods that paint the picture of what Springfield actually is. And I know that the mayor's department and those around him will be working to hopefully make sure that's the case.
And if you have, and again, if there is an event or a function or something that is noteworthy that tells that positive story of Springfield in a neighborhood, please make sure we know about it and we can incorporate it. With that much, there's room for a lot of things to be focused on.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Gomez.
At first, in the beginning, I wasn't really kind of in favor of it, but meeting with you and understanding and seeing that you guys are willing to work with us and come back, I think it shows a positive attitude, and I think that all of us can, probably through economic development, maybe reach out to the communities, or if it's the EDC, a letter of some sort telling folks that have these events and all the way up to 16 acres, different fairs, that we want to know when these things are going on, because I know sometimes not all of us have it all on our calendars, but I believe having that open door, let us know when something's happening and we can get there to get the whole picture. I think that's the most positive outlook, and I think the most positive thing you said that it's not going to be an MGM commercial, and I think you won me over with that one. So I wish you nothing but luck, and hopefully all of those folks that said that they're going to match you are going to come through. But I think that $1 million project to encompass what Springfield really is the positive attitude and what we want, and to our visitors that what we want to attract. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and conversations.
Councilor Letterman.
To check in about some of the conversation that we had at the Economic Development Committee when this was before us. I'm glad that Mr. Sullivan and the EDC have committed to this being a campaign that paints a story of all of Springfield, of all of our neighborhoods and our community, the events that occur there, the attractions that are throughout our city. I just want to make sure, we had talked about having a point person in there, and I'm okay with that point being the Economic Development Committee, as long as we're receiving regular updates as the campaign progresses about what is in the works for it. That's very important to me, because I just want to make sure that the council continues to have a say in how that goes.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. This is a financial order subject to Rule 19 under the City Council Rules and Orders, which requires 2 votes. All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
On voting in favor of the transfer, Councilor Williams. Yes. Yes. Councilor Twiggs. Yes. Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh. Yes. Yes. Councilor Fenton. Yes. Yes. Councilor Letterman. Yes, Councilor Edwards. Yes. Yes, Councilor Ash. Yes. Yes, Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ryan. Yes. Yes, Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved. Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think there's another item on our agenda that we've all talked about. I think we probably all know where we stand on it. So I'd like to see if we could take item 12 out of order.
If there is no objection, Mr. Clerk, item number 12.
Item number 12 is the collective bargaining agreement ratification for the Springfield Fire Chiefs
I
Association.
don't even think we need a discussion.
Good evening, councilors. Bill Mahoney, Director of HR and Labor Relations. This is the same tentative agreement we talked about on February 5th, 2018. Negotiations began on January 25th, 2013. There are approximately 10 employees in this bargaining unit. We've had 9 bargaining sessions and 3 mediation sessions. This is a series of 4 contracts covering the period of July 1st, 2012 to June 30th, 2020. The last time these employees had a raise was in July 1st, 2011. Residency, all employees entering this bargaining unit on or after February 1st, 2018 are subject to the city ordinances. So it's not just like the 10 years we have with the IFF. This is their entire career in this bargaining unit. They're going to be be living in the city. We've added a social media policy to this contract. The COLA is at 15.5%. We had knocked that down from 17. We've added collateral duties to this group. Never had them before. So every fire district chief is going to have additional duties added to it. And then we've created the director of training into the bargaining unit.
Councilor Hurst.
Mr. Chair, I'm sure my colleagues know why I would vote against this at this point in time after hearing this contract come before us on a number of occasions. What I would like to do is make a motion to send it to committee. As many of you know, there is a 10 taxpayer citizens lawsuit that is currently awaiting a decision from Judge Sweeney. I think it will reach a little further than our solicitor believes it will do in terms of forcing the city to actually implement the ordinance that is on the books now. I understand that the solicitor disagrees with me, but we don't have to litigate that issue here. We can simply await for Judge Sweeney to give her ruling. And so my motion would be to send this to committee until Judge Sweeney rules.
Motion made by Councilor Hurst to send the matter to committee. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilor Gomez. All in favor of sending the item to committee, say aye. Aye. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On sending the contract to committee, Councilor Williams. Yes. Councilor Twiggs. Yes. Councilor Shea.
No.
No. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
No.
No. Councilor Fenton.
No.
No. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash. No. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. No. Councilor Allen.
No.
No. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. This matter will be referred to the General Government Committee. Back to our regular agenda, Mr. Clerk.
The first item on tonight's agenda is a...
If there's no objection, item number 23, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 23 is a special act authorizing is a special act entitled an act authorizing the appointment of special police officers in the city of Springfield.
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening.
I'm asking you to approve the act that will allow us to have retired Springfield police officers fill in for certain vendor jobs in the city of Springfield to act as special police officers. These retirees are needed at this point in time. With the current economic development in the city and ongoing construction and road work, there's an increased demand for extra job officers, and we have had difficulty filling these jobs, especially during the summer months. Last summer, there were several jobs that went unfilled, and we have to reach out to the state police. We have to reach out to different contractors to combine jobs because they are required to hire. We're looking to swear in these officers who have retired in the past 5 years that retired in good standing. We lost many officers over the past 5 years that went at a younger age. They're eligible for retirement with 32 years of service to the city and when their age is 55, or a combination. You can be a little bit younger than 55 if you have more than 32 years. So we've lost some qualified, experienced officers who could be sworn in as special police officers if you so allow, and that would allow us to fill these jobs that we need to fill when the patrolmen's union and the supervisors union cannot meet this need. The best qualified police officer is one with experience. So we're not looking to hire new people. We don't want an auxiliary force with people who aren't experienced. I stand before you today on the anniversary of my 39th year at the Springfield Police Department, and I can tell you the one thing I've learned in 39 years is you can't teach experience. So I want to bring some, thank you. Thank you. We have some retired officers here in the audience, and what they can bring to the table is immeasurable, not only as a role model to the younger officers, but people to fill in when we need them that will do the job, do it correctly, not embarrass us, and represent the city of Springfield well. They're talented, dedicated officers that retired before their 65 years. The qualifications for special officer they do have to terminate at 65 years of age. We've looked at other policies, other surrounding departments, Westfield, West Springfield, all the departments that have the auxiliaries, and through coordination and help with the law department and the human resources department here in the city, we think that this is the best viable action that we can take at this time to make sure that our streets are safe, the construction can go on as necessary, and you have qualified people out there. So Thank you for your time.
Councilor Hurst.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think I think what you're doing is makes perfect sense. We always want to draw from the experience. I think one of the issues that I have with this is that this is the first time that I'm hearing of it, and so there are some serious questions that I have in terms of the police officers that will be filling these roles, how many we need, and what the cost is to the city. And so it would seem to me that we could have a public safety meeting on this very briefly, and we could further discuss this issue in committee and then bring it out at our next meeting.
I do have, if you have a second, Mrs. Jen Leiden. She's our finance officer. She's crunched some figures for me so that I would have them here tonight.
Do you want to discuss now or bring it to committee?
I think it would be more appropriate to bring it to committee, and then we can have a further discussion on not only that, but a number of other issues that other councilors may have. Is this urgent? Is this something that needs to be, I mean, is there a time factor in this?
There's an urgent need. The road work has started, and the jobs are going to start going unfilled. And it's going to take some time to swear in these special police officers, do the backgrounds of the special police officers, and get them equipped again, and get them certified again. They're going to have to go through a gun qualification, first aid. So we're probably talking several weeks after this approval. So yes, I would say it's an urgency.
So I don't mind having the subcommittee meeting shortly after this meeting, and then bring it out at our next meeting if that would not impede on what it is that you're trying to do from a timeline standpoint. I think there's some serious questions that I would like to have answered. I can't speak for the rest of my colleagues, but I want to know the officers that we're looking to hire. I have some questions around those that are being promoted to sergeant now, and so I just want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence when we're talking about bringing back retired police officers.
Absolutely. I will tell you that we're probably looking at 20 officers to start to get this off and running, and I will tell you that there's a committee formed by the commissioner to do the selection, to make sure that the officers that we hire will be a good example to get this program off and running.
And I'd love to hear more about that committee. Again, this is the first time that I'm hearing of it, and so it's very new to me and green. So I'm hopeful that we can have a subcommittee meeting to discuss it.
Councilor, is that a motion? All right, there's a motion to send the matter to a committee, seconded by, was there a second? No, seconded by Councilor Gomez. Councilor Walsh on the motion?
I oppose to move to committee.
Anyone else on the motion? Councilor Ryan.
On the motion, the problem is today is April 9th. We're not due back here till the first week or so in May. And the legislative session ends pretty shortly thereafter. They'll be in the budget. So any likelihood that it's going to get past this construction season, if we wait till May, is probably slim and none, and Slim just left the building. Further, Mr. President, I have had great experience not with the Springfield Special Police, but with the West Springfield Special Police. So I have some idea as to what the idea is, what the structure is, what the purpose is. And in West Springfield, for example, I don't think there's an age limit, and they can work as long as they want. Here, if you're going to mandate that they have to leave at age 65, which is a regular retirement, you're getting a much smaller pool. I don't think that we as a council really can sit here and ask who's going to be in it. I think it would be open to all retirees, and I know that the way they did it in West Springfield is if there's an empty job, then it goes to the retirees, and then to the specials. And I assume that that's the way it would be here. If there's the regular officers get the extra job details first.
Correct.
And so the specials, the retirees, would only be in the case of there's no present duty officer who's available to cover that shift.
Close, Councilor. The big difference between West Springfield and our program, West Springfield has an auxiliary force. So we're just swearing in these officers as special police officers to give them power of arrest. And what that does is it makes it a lot more affordable and economical for the city of Springfield. The auxiliary force requires a lot more training, and you are taking people in past that 5 years that they've retired, and MPTC says if you've been out of police work for more than 5 years, you have to go through another academy. So by just taking these officers who have retired within the last 5 years, there's no academy requirement. The requirement is that they just go through recertification, which will be less expensive and much more expedient for us to get officers out on the street when we need them.
And once this leaves here, it has to go to Boston and go through the legislative, get signed by the governor, etc.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. Mr. President, it's such a short window. I would ask that we not send this to committee, allow the police department to run its day-to-day. Otherwise, you're going to have potentially dangerous construction scenes in the city without people there to guard them.
Correct. Thank you.
Council, just in terms of the timeline, you're correct. Our next regular meeting isn't until May 7th. However, if this item does go to committee, because of its urgency, I would be happy to put it under suspension for the next hearings meeting, which is April 23rd, as long as Councilor Hurst can hold a committee meeting in the meantime. Anyone else on the motion? Councilor Ash.
Deputy, so the process is if there's an open job, it goes to patrolman, correct?
Correct. We have, yep.
Anyone eligible there goes to
It goes to the Supervisors Association.
Then it goes to state police?
Then right now we're using state police.
Okay, so, and all the bargaining units are on board with the process, right?
Both the IBPO and the Supervisors Association came to me for this option because we're running that short.
Okay, and so the cost would just be related to the certification, because the cost of having someone on the road obviously is borne by the company that's doing the work, correct?
Correct. Right. What we've done is we've required the special police officer to get trained and pay for their own equipment in terms of their shirts, their pants, their belts, their gun belts. The department their vests, they'll have to supply their own vests. The department will supply a gun, and we will supply the radio so that we can stay on top of both of those, our most expensive assets per officer, as well as the ammo so they can shoot during the academy.
And those are returned afterwards. So Jen, what's a ballpark figure it's going to cost?
For the special police officer to start, it'll be roughly $1,300, and we are using radios that are used, so we don't have to purchase new radios. It will only be $400 per officer for the department. And we're looking at, again, 20 to fill. We've had over 120 officers retire in the past 3 years. And we have a pool that we are going to select specifically from a board that was selected by the commissioner to go through those retirees that have retired within the past 5 years and select people out who we think will be the least risk and the most experienced officers.
I think it's a dangerous proposition, Mr. President. There's a ton of work going on all over the city. We drive, all of us, every day, and not have an officer at some of those sites, to me, is beyond dangerous and irresponsible. And I understand Councilor Hurst wanting to delve into this further, but I also agree with Councilor Ryan that if we don't act quickly, then no one knows better than you, Mr. President, that the legislative process is onerous. And so I think it behooves us to act on this tonight and get the ball rolling.
Councilor Edwards on the motion.
I'm not opposed to the proposal that you're putting forward, but just for my own information, I'd like to have, I'm kind of support the idea just because we didn't know about it, and I do have some questions. Approximately 7 or 8 years ago, I thought that the legislature approved civilian flaggers. And is that inaccurate? And I'm not necessarily, I guess my question is multifaceted. First of all, is it legal for Massachusetts to have civilian flaggers? Because if I remember correctly, at the time that passed, if it in fact is true, I know there was a lot of pushback by the unions and by police departments across the state because they really didn't want them. And I may not necessarily be appropriate for every situation or circumstance for civilian flaggers to use it, but one of the purposes or support of that legislation, if it in fact is true that it did pass, was to allow for communities to save some money. And I know, or I believe Ed's coming up to kind of give me some clarity on that. But that's the type of thing that when we're in committee I could have asked, but I got a feeling this is probably not going to get to committee. And the other thing is and this is not a slight to you in any way, but unfortunately, too often, issues that are important, where we might have questions, are brought to us with certain urgency that doesn't afford us an opportunity to ask the type of questions that we would like to ask. And I think that might be where my colleagues' concerns and suggestion of going to committee are rooted in. So that's nothing unique to the police department or slighted any other department across the city. Appreciate the service of everybody involved, but I do believe that around the time that I came on the council, the state legislature did create the civilian flaggers. I know in some of the southern states they use them. Thought it was a great opportunity for us to save some money and to create another industry for people to be employed. And everybody here knows I'm not a big social justice kind of guy, but I am a big put people to work kind of guy. So can somebody just answer the question of whether or not it's legal or use?
Yeah, in general, there is a law that allows for civilian flaggers. In Springfield, we have issues because of both of our collective bargaining contracts in the police department have severe limitations that make that not workable. In addition, and part of the reason going into the bargaining aspect was the difference between a civilian flagger and a police is night and day. When it comes to getting people to slow down or just, follow directions of someone who's trying to direct traffic around people working, there is much more receptiveness to someone in uniform as opposed to the civilian flaggers. So that is part of the safety situation too. But I think we've all seen where there's been accidents around construction sites in the road. It's a hazardous job. We recognize that, but there's a huge demand here that's going unfilled that this legislation tries to address. This legislation has been in place, almost identical legislation in Brockton. And as you said, there's many communities around here that have very similar programs. We've tried to put into this legislation balance to minimize the risk of any exposure to liability that might occur, and that's one of the reasons it's a cutoff at age 65, and that's also a cutoff as to if they do become injured on duty under this legislation, they're cut off at age 65 as well.
Finally, I'm not opposed to what you're being proposed. Thank you for acknowledging that it is legal to use the flaggers, and I won't debate their value. I can appreciate that. But I guess my only final comment is just the fact that perception is reality. We don't understand your job when you're out there doing it. And there's nothing more disheartening as a retired state employee to hear people talk about when they see 6 guys looking down in the hole standing around. Same thing with you guys when you're doing this work. I mean, no offense, but we don't understand exactly what's going on. And when we're backed up in traffic because of construction and we see you standing there and we don't always see what you're doing or what the value or what you're doing. So just be conscious of that, because now we're asking for more people to be out there as retirees, and I'm sure that we're going to hear from somebody who doesn't think this is a good idea, and we least, so I just felt like it was fair enough to say that perception is reality, and we may not understand what exactly you're doing, but if it looks like you're just looking off this way and traffic's coming this way, that just kind of feeds the perception that this is just make work. So thank you, gentlemen, but appreciate all your service, and please go home safely to your families.
Thank you,
Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just looking at this, there's different pieces to this. The piece about assigning the police and telling them knowing what to do, that's obviously something you do every day, and I assume, right? And these are police that you're talking about are retired Springfield police?
Yes, sir.
So they are familiar with the rules and regulations and the procedures and et cetera of the department.
Correct.
So that part seems fine to me. One of the other pieces is the whole legal, HR, benefits, age, and how number of hours per week and all that they could work. I know you've got some of that in here. Has that all been addressed with the HR department and with any other parts of City Hall?
It was a little bit over my head, Counselor. So I depended on the H&R here, Mr. Mahoney, and I depended on Attorney Pakula, and we worked it out through them, and then in coordination with what other departments have. In Brockton, we are kind of mirroring Brockton's act. It's working well out there. And the reason why we want the retirees is just that. There's experience. They know what they're doing. The training for them to catch them right up and put them right out in the street is minimal.
So I would say that, normally I wish that we had found out about this a little bit earlier and gone through the Public Safety Committee or something. But based on the pieces I just talked about, it sounds like there's not a lot of risk. The people are doing this every day, and you've vetted it with the HR department and the law department. Is that
They're
true?
not city employees. They'll be contracted vendors.
They'll be contracted employees. Okay. So they'll be paid out of the police budget.
No,
they'll be paid from the vendors. Will pay for their extra detail duties. So they will not be coming out of the general fund.
Okay. All right. Well, based on that, I don't see the risk, and I do see the opportunity. So I know there's a move to put this in committee. I'm questioning whether we need to do that.
Before we get to more questions, there is a motion on the floor, and I have a feeling we have a lot more questions that we want to ask tonight. So would it be appropriate that we vote on the motion to committee first? These may be questions that could be answered in committee. And so I'm going to ask that we take a vote on the motion to committee. Motion that was made by Councilor Hurst. It was seconded by Councilor Gomez. All in favor of sending the matter to committee, say aye. Aye. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On sending the act to committee, Councilor Williams. Yes. Yes. Councilor Twiggs. Yes. Councilor Shea.
No.
No. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
No.
No. Councilor Fenton.
No.
No. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards. Yes. Yes. Councilor Ash.
No.
No. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. No. Councilor Allen.
No.
No. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. The matter will be sent to Public Safety Committee, and I will put it on the agenda for April 23rd, as I mentioned earlier, under suspension, and Councilor Hurst will hold a subcommittee meeting in the meantime.
Item number 1 is the February Revenues versus Expenditures Report.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. President. I am here in place of Pat Burns tonight, and I have the expense and revenue report for the end of February. Our revenues are at 68%, and our expenditures are at 68%.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Items 2 through, can we take 2 through 7 together, Mr. Clerk?
Item 2 is actually a change to the rules of the road regarding valet parking at one financial plaza.
Okay, we'll take that one separate then.
Yeah.
Item number 2.
Good evening, councilors. I was just going to make that recommendation. I would like to discuss items 3 through 7 at this point. All petitions through the Board of Public Works. Item number 3, Eversource installing a new service at Lower State Street for the courthouse. Item number 4, out of 95 State Street to the Mass Mutual Center. Items 5, 6, and 7 are Columbia Gas. Item 5, Quincy Street. It is Tyler, Quincy, and Orleans Street. Item 6, CMA, new gas lines in Methuen, which also includes Methuen, Wallace, and Boston Road. And the last one, Amherst Street, includes Amherst, Princeton, Dorchester, and Berkeley Street for installation 5 through 7 for Columbia Gas, Eversource for number 3, and fiber optic for number 4.
What can you tell us about item number 2?
I think we should handle that one separately.
Okay.
I'll discuss that in a second, but I think we should vote on, my recommendation would be to vote on these 3 items first.
All right. Items 3 through 7, Mr. Clerk.
As the director succinctly described, items 3 through 4. One is Eversource, is from petitioner Eversource for the installation of conduit on State Street. I think items 4 is also from Eversource. Item 4 is the installation on State Street. Items 5 through 6 are from Columbia Gas for the installation of gas facilities on Quincy, Methuen, and Amherst Street.
Council Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have any issue with 3, 5, 6, or 7, but 4 is not a public utility, and it's running from a building that's involved potentially in the MGM project. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Basically, they're installing a conduit system that's going out of 95 State Street through the public way, up State Street to the backside. I call it the backside of the Mass Mutual Center. So they're installing it, conduit within the public way.
But who is they? So Zayo is...
Zayo.
But for what purpose? For what benefit? I mean, I looked at the company's website. It says they do broadband and communications. It's not a telephone company or it's not a
No,
utility.
essentially what they're installing is, from what I understand, fiber optic system to be able to connect those two facilities.
I want to refer that one to committee, Mr. President, just because who's asking to do that? I mean, the building is owned. The future of 95 State Street isn't certain as it relates to the Elm Street project, and so unless there's a compelling time issue, Chris, I would just like to know, and maybe if you have the answer, we can sort it out here. I mean, who's making the request? It's not initiating from the city.
Zayo. No, it's not being initiated from the city.
Yeah, I want to talk to Zayo. So I would make a motion that we refer item number 4 to committee.
Motion made by Council Fenton, seconded by Council Edwards to send item number 4 to the Casino Oversight Committee. All in favor say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any other questions on the remaining items? Seeing none. All in favor of accepting the petition say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 2.
Item number 2 is a amendment to the rules of the road regarding valet parking at One Financial Plaza.
Good evening, councilors. An application has been submitted to the DPW and to the Traffic Commission and was reviewed at their meeting last week for the installation of 6 valet parking spaces for the building immediately adjacent to City Hall here. The approval, there's a little confusion as far as the information that's been submitted to the council. The information that was approved at the council is for 6 valet parking spaces on City Hall Place, which is adjacent to this building, 3 on each side of the street. I have had concerns about this. There is an extreme issue with parking in the area now, obviously with the construction going on. Information was submitted back to Evan Plotkin for the building next door. I had concerns over charging for valet parking. It is public space that is being, that there is going to be a charge for. So what we asked for is that it be voted on at the Traffic Commission and then be presented to the City Council.
Councilor Walsh.
I am a member of the Traffic Commission, and we did discuss this on Monday, and it was well received by the Traffic Commission. There was an explanation given for your concern. You're really not charging for parking, you're charging for the space. I mean, I think it would be appropriate if Mr. Plotkin could explain the difference, and then your fears might be allayed. But I think it's a great idea. I think it says a lot about the city of Springfield. We're going to have a lot of people coming here that may not know where to go. We all know what a crunch parking is. We all know that's one of the major things that keeps businesses from coming to downtown Springfield, is not having a place to park. And I think that they have they've come up with a great plan that's going to benefit not only people who have to use the businesses in One Financial Plaza, but also our residents who might come down to City Hall. We all know how tight that is, who want to pay a bill and do not want to come out and fund a $50 ticket. So I think this has more pluses than minuses. And I mean, time is short tonight, but I think this is a great idea. and I'm going to support it.
Councilor Edwards.
Will help with this one, and if it's, my colleagues will bear me a little patience, and this is directed to my colleague. At the last casino meeting we had, the issue of valet parking came up in relation to MGM and the use of public property for a paid service such as valet was essentially kind of shot down or suggested it might not be appropriate by the attorneys in the meeting. Am I off base with that, Mr. Fenton?
Thank you very much, Councilor Edwards, for the question. So I did raise that issue with the solicitor earlier this evening. Is he here still? Oh, hi. And I would rather have him respond to that. But to your point, we did discuss valet parking, and one of the concerns was charging, operating in the public space, and if the solicitor could answer that question about what would be different about this proposal from what we were talking the Casino Oversight Committee meeting, that would be helpful.
Good evening. I guess basically I don't have perfect knowledge on this. I'm told that there are services that are in existence that are charging. I'm not aware of them. I'm aware of 2 valet parking, one just because I've used it, and that's in front of the fort, and you don't pay anything. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I know we have an ordinance on valet parking. I'm most familiar with the valet parking that's down the south end because I participated in the grant that we got. There's no city money going into that. It's purely a grant from the Gaming Commission, and it's not to benefit any one building or any one business. And in fact, there's a prohibition against aiding a private business under certain circumstances. The anti-aid amendment, which talks about not aiding religion or nonprofits by financial support, that I want to look into here as to how this is going to work, because I have not seen the details. I saw for the first time tonight the proposal. My background on this was very minimal, and I would like the chance to issue an opinion on it as to how it's going to work. Because we do charge, I know there's no charge at the fort, I know that there's no charge down the south end, I know that there's no city money going into the south end, it's all by a grant. I know it's not to benefit any one building or business, it's to benefit all the businesses that are in that location. So those are the issues that I have from a legal perspective that I'd like to look into.
Councilor Fenton.
Motion to committee, Mr. President.
Okay, so the council, you can another option would be to request a legal opinion. Would you consider requesting a legal opinion, or do you want to send this matter to the Maintenance and Development Committee?
I would stick to my motion to committee so that this does have time to use opinion.
All right, motion made by Councilor Fenton, seconded by Councilor Shea. All in favor of sending the matter to the Maintenance and Development Subcommittee, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 8.
Item number 8 is a grant approval for the Complete Streets Tier 3 construction program in the amount of $365,022.
Good evening, councilors. A little bit over a year ago, this body approved our Complete Streets program for the city of Springfield. What that has allowed us to do to make applications to Mass DOT for support of our Complete Streets program. We have been lucky enough to be awarded $365,000 by Mass DOT to support a number of initiatives in the city. In general, it's going to help us connect a lot of the projects that we have now that have enhanced bike routes in the city. So one of the programs is to install a lot of bike lanes in the city, be able to put up correct signage, correct line striping. to be able to improve our crosswalks in a lot of areas of the city, include a bicycle program in the city where we can have locations, especially at our libraries, where people will be able to put their bicycles. And I mentioned some of the others, and in the Metro Center itself, the MGM project is going to be, and with the work that we're doing on Main Street, there's going to be a lot of bike lanes added, and this is going to allow us to really complete the Metro Center area with regard to bike and pedestrian improvements. The work that we would be proposing to do, most of the work would occur this summer. All the line work would be when we would do our regular line painting throughout the city, so we would be talking about getting all that done in July and August.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the grant say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Items, I believe we can take 9 through 11, Mr. Clerk.
Item 9 is the FY18 state aid to public libraries increase in the amount of $9,825.96. Item number 10 is the Excite Transformation for Libraries project in the amount of $2,000. Item number 11 is a fire department donation in the amount of $275.
All in favor of accepting the grant say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Number 14.
Item number 14 is an order accepting MGL 40, Section 57 as amended regarding local licenses and permits.
Good evening, councilors.
Good evening.
Currently, one of the biggest tools we have in collecting past-due taxes is when a business or a person, anybody comes in to get a license or a permit, we can withhold that permit. The easiest example is a liquor license. We can hold it until all the taxes are paid. In the past, the law that was on the books and the ordinance, which is 229, Section 2, stated that I couldn't supply a list of people who withhold these licenses for a period of less than 12 months. So basically, they could be delinquent for a year, still get their license. With the modernization bill that the state just passed, they've decided to make it a little bit easier to collect past due taxes, and they've now changed it to just past due. So once it's past due, we can say you have to do this. And we would like to change, but it's a ordinance, it's a provision that has to be accepted by this body before we can enact it.
Any questions or comments? Councilor Ryan.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Ryan, seconded by Councilor Allen. This matter will be referred to the General Government Committee. All in favor of sending the item to committee, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Item number 21 is also related without objection, Mr. Clerk. Item number 21.
Item number 21 is an ordinance to amend.
The 21 is related to.
Item 21 is an amendment to Chapter 229 regarding licenses and permits.
Is there a motion? Motion made by Councilor Gomez, seconded by Councilor Fenton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. The matter will also be sent to the General Government Committee.
Item number 15 is an order accepting the local sales tax on the sale of marijuana.
All right, so this item, I am the lead sponsor on this item. I'm going to ask Attorney Davis to just give a brief overview. It's pretty straightforward. If you all have any questions for me, I'll be glad to step down and answer any questions. But I'm going to ask Attorney Davis to explain the order.
So this is in order to accept the local sales tax option for the sale of marijuana. What the council has to do is accept this through an order according to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 4, Section 4, and it's just to accept the 3% sales tax as a city. Yes.
It's collected by merchant,
Yes.
paid to the state, and then it comes back to the city?
Yes.
Councilor Walsh?
Yes, I myself do not feel comfortable with this tonight. I think there's so much involved with marijuana, and I thought that we were waiting for more of an explanation on marijuana and how we were going to adjust things till we know what all the regulations are from the state. I don't think we've ever really had a full meeting on anything like that. So I'd like to make a motion that this would go to committee, because I think that we've got to do this right.
There's a motion to send the matter to committee made by Councilor Walsh, seconded by Councilor Ash. Councilor Shea on the motion.
You know, I think before we send this to committee, I think, if I understand this right, the state is allowing the city to collect a tax on the sale of the marijuana. So it's going to be revenue into the city of Springfield.
We don't know what that is.
And while we're waiting for regulations on setting up those businesses, at least they'll know going into it that Springfield is going to tax that sale, and we're going to receive that money. I mean, I think that's it in a nutshell. I mean, we either want to take in this money, and keep in mind a lot of the local communities are opting out of having marijuana sold in their community, so they're going to be coming here and spending their money. So if we're going to have the burden of these institutions, we ought to at least accept the tax money, and I don't see why we have to send that to a committee to decide, do we want to make a huge revenue increase for the city, but it's up to the council to decide that.
This was one of the more straightforward portions of the general laws as far as marijuana goes. It's pretty straightforward.
I actually echo Katie's sentiment. I think there's a lot more to what the city council has to do with respect to regulating marijuana. I've formally asked the mayor to send a few councilors to Colorado. That may seem far-fetched, but if you're talking about a 3% local tax, I'd imagine that we can recoup that money fairly quickly. And what it'll allow us to do, just like any other professional development, it'll allow us to identify where a city or a similar city like Colorado made their mistakes, and so as to not allow us to make those same mistakes again. It only seems to make sense that when we're dealing with something of this magnitude and something that's going to be in place for a long time, that we get it right and we make sure we do our due diligence. And I know Councilor Shea, I just left a school committee conference, and at that particular school committee conference, our superintendent was down there, and he was down there looking at English immersion. And before he was willing to implement any program throughout the city of Springfield in our public schools, he made it a point to go to San Antonio where they're doing it and they're having success with it, to go down there and analyze what it is that they're doing well and how can we in turn emulate that in the city of Springfield. So in my opinion, it seems as though we should do the same with marijuana. We're one of the few states in the early states that is looking to regulate recreational marijuana, and we should have a thorough understanding as to what that entails. And I think going to Denver and having a few councilors report back to the rest of the city, not only on the impacts of a local tax, because I imagine that there are impacts, whether it's requiring a few businesses to bail out or any other ramifications. We ought to know those before we vote on something in one fair swoop. So I too agree with Councilor Walsh. I will be formally sending a letter to the mayor in hopes that we can reach some sort of compromise. His response was lackluster when I asked him before, but my hope is that with a compromise, he'll certainly sign on.
Councilor Williams and then Councilor Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Attorney Davis, just a quick question. Is 3%, when you look at neighboring states in regards to 3%, is that standard? Is it higher than that in other places?
I'm actually not certain what it is in other places, but I know that when the law initially changed allowing recreational marijuana, there was some back and forth between the legislature discussing what the local tax option should be. So it's well thought out. They have discussed it, but I'm not certain what other states are doing as far as local sales tax.
And this is what the state is also recommending, is it 3%?
Up to 3%.
Up to 3%.
Up to 3%.
Thank you.
Councilor Gomez.
I just want to thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership in filing this and understanding how important it is to get ahead of the game. But I also want to fully understand and have the conversation so then we don't, get ahead of ourselves. And I honestly am, I love the idea of what Councilor Hurst had talked about of maybe making that leap to understand exactly what other places are doing. But I don't mind having that in my subcommittee. Obviously, a majority of the regulations are coming through economic development, but I'm in full support of it. But whatever the will of the council is, I think it's important for us to really understand, when it comes to cannabis, what are the pros and cons. And this is definitely a pro, and we want to be in full knowledge of it. And so,
obviously, council rules prevent me from going into too much detail, but just for point of clarification, as Attorney Davis mentioned, this is one of the most straightforward options and items that the City Council is required to take, and in the interest of making progress. Again, in the interest of making progress, that was the reason why I decided to bring it forward at this time. Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I certainly respect your bringing this forward and agree with you that it is one of the more straightforward items. I'm certainly in favor of a local sales tax, but I do want to express some concern about our processes here in terms of taking up the various issues that have to do with our regulation of this new industry coming into the city. The council has, in my understanding, some great responsibility in regulating this going forward. I was an advocate for shortening the moratorium that was originally proposed because I felt that we needed to have the city move forward in developing the regulations, as is our responsibility. But I really believe that we need to have a more concerted and planned out effort in terms of taking up these regulations. I'd love to see, I know briefly before my swearing in, we had a committee of the whole that had some explanation from our legal department about our responsibilities. I would love to see another committee of the whole meeting that lays out what all of our responsibilities will be going forward. I'd like to see our committee meetings in economic development where a lot of this is going forward in terms of getting these discussions going. And then I think that we should present a package at a later meeting it takes up many of these issues after we've had a chance to talk them through. So while I understand that this is a simple one that we can take up, I will support a measure to committee so that we can, further in committee plan out how we're going to take all of these up. And I'd also point out for those watching or for those here, we're sending a lot of things to committee tonight. And I expect I'm going to get some messages about that tomorrow. But I really think it's so important for us to do our due diligence on all of these issues. And, personally, we're the closest elected body to the people of the city of Springfield. So when things are placed on our agenda at the last minute, and I'm not necessarily with respect to this particular order, but in general, when things are placed on the agenda at the last minute, it's very difficult for us to take votes on that, or for me to take a vote on that without being able to hear in more detail. And unfortunately, this particular setting does not allow for detailed questioning with regard to things. So I just want folks to understand that the reason we're sending things to committee is not to kick things down the road, but to ensure that we're actually making the correct decisions for the city as we carry out the people's business. So I will support a motion to committee, and I hope that we can take up all of the regulations that we are required to do around this new industry in a concerted and purposeful manner moving forward.
Councilor Shea.
I understand, committee members, the need to study items and to get all the details. And a lot of the items that we've sent to committee tonight require that. But this is a regulation from the state saying that you can charge 3% on the sale. So the discussion is if you sell $3 million worth of marijuana, you're going to get a 3% tax on that. The only thing for us to decide is do we want to take 1%, 2%, or 3%. But let me tell you, when the budget comes in here and everybody in here has got looking to spend some money on, you're all going to want that 3%. So that is the depth of the thinking that's going to go into this. Now, I know we get some complicated things to think about, but when someone says you take in $10 million, you get 3% of that, I don't see why it takes 13 people the brain power to send it to a committee and make that decision. But if that's
the level that we have here, go ahead and send it to a committee.
Councilor Twiggs.
I almost don't want to say anything, my colleague The question is really straightforward. I mean, you're telling the state, yes, the city wants to collect sales taxes. I mean, you're on record doing that. Am I right, Mr. President? You can answer the question.
That's correct.
Essentially, that's all we're doing. I mean, you ain't making no laws, nothing. You're just telling the state, the city of Springfield is prepared. It's almost like getting a bond, I think.
Councilor Williams.
Just very briefly, I echo Councilor Shea's point on this. I really do, in the sense that we just voted recently on a moratorium, and I know that I've heard the flack behind that in terms of people thinking that we are leaning towards pushing this down the road when it's something that we should be handling now. And I think approving this tonight, the up to 3% sales tax, sends a message to our community that we're serious about making sure that this is progressing, and that, in terms of Mr. Pakula and Attorney Davis working on the issue with us, that I'm taking their expertise on this and saying that if this is straightforward, then I believe the City Council tonight should approve it, and I don't see an outstanding reason not to. More information, I've been doing my research, so I know that a 3% sales tax is standard for most states that have approved recreational marijuana. So just leaving that, and I also, Attorney Davis brought to my attention that this language needs to be amended. It's very simply for the Section 3A just to say Section 3 in the title, as well as throughout the rest of the language.
Mr. President, I want you to know that I'm in favor of not paying any taxes on mine.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor, and so we will take up that amendment at the conclusion of the vote for committee. Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I really like what Councilor Hirsch had to say and support him in that endeavor. And how do we know that, dim-witted or not, our constituents don't want to listen to a discussion on this before we take a vote? I think as a courtesy, we should have a hearing on this. I mean, there's so many aspects of marijuana. It may bring up other aspects of it, but I think this is something that's going to impact so many people. There should be another discussion on it.
Just for the record, this item was previously discussed at the Committee of the Whole meeting and in the Economic Development Subcommittee. All right, so there's a motion on the floor. Councilor Allen on the motion.
Just one quick point. Sales tax in this state is normally 6% or something, so I have the question of how did this come up as 1%, 2%, or 3%? If any of us stop on the way home and buy something that is taxable, you're going to pay, I think, 6.25%. This is less than that. By design, it's less than that. I don't understand why, and just like to know a little more about it. Thanks.
Yeah, maybe people. Yeah.
So the 3% was selected by President Ramos as the top, 1, 2, or 3, and he chose 3. But it's on top. It's on top of a state excise tax and a state sales tax. Right.
Councilor Edwards.
It's a lot to consider.
I mean, disrespect any of my colleagues, but as desperate as we are for revenues to get into our neighborhoods and to provide services, can't imagine any legitimate reason why we would not want to maximize and go with 1 or 2%. Obviously, I'm going on record now saying that I would support 3%. To my colleague's point and to Katie's point about having committees, I'm not opposed to a committee meeting being scheduled to talk about the other parts or the steps along the path to get this out there as quickly as we can. That's probably much of the frustration that you're hearing from people, is that we have not been allowed to just move and say yay or nay whether or not this is moving forward and what we're going to do. It is coming in incremental by the state. We didn't have the option of voting for this 6 months ago or a year ago is now available to us. I think we need to send a message that we're going and moving as fast as the state is allowing us to do, and it would send a signal that we're saying yay or nay on the things that we can, but it doesn't preclude us from having a committee meeting to talk about whether it's 500 feet from a church or how close to a residential area or the zoning of it. But who's here going to vote to say they don't want less than, they don't want the revenues that go along with it? So, and I'd be happy to hear any of you go on record now saying that you don't want all of the revenues on it.
All right. So there's a motion on the floor to send the matter to committee. This would go to the Economic Development Subcommittee. All in favor of sending the matter to committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On sending the item to committee, Councilor Williams.
No.
No. Councilor Twiggs. No. Councilor Shea.
No.
No. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
No.
No. Councilor Letterman. Yes. Yes. Councilor Edwards.
No.
No. Councilor Ash. Yes. Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. No. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
No, not sufficient. Motion fails. Any further discussion? Councilor Fenton.
Yes. This question for Attorney Davis. It was just sort of pain to figure out how to vote there because I was convinced that I was ready to do this tonight until an item just occurred to me based on some of the last testimony. So there is a medicinal component to this.
Yes.
Are the medicinal sales subject to this same 3% tax?
No, this is only for marijuana retailers.
Good.
Any further questions? Seeing none, I believe this requires a roll call. All right, roll call, Mr. Clerk. Is this subject to Rule 19? All right. All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. I'm sorry. There was a motion for an amendment.
Yes.
Councilor Williams.
I'd just like to make a motion to amend Section 3A to reflect Section 3 and the title and throughout the document.
Motion made by Councilor Williams, seconded by Councilor Edwards. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Just to be clear on the amendment, it's to change 3A to just 3 throughout the document. Okay.
Now, Mr. Clerk, this requires a two-thirds vote?
Yes.
And in the event that the order fails? What's your question? In the event that the order fails, would I be able to bring it back?
Yes. On approving the order, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs. Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Councilor Walsh.
No.
No. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards. Yes. Yes. Councilor Ash. Yes. Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Order is approved.
Item number 16 is an order of taking of land and easements for the Six Corners Traffic Improvement Project.
Good evening, councilors. By way of a little history, back in 2012, the city received $21.9 million from HUD regarding the CDBG DR disaster recovery money. The Department of Public Works became in charge of 3 projects. One of them was the Marble Street Extension project, which we discussed a few weeks ago. Number 2 was Central Street, which will be coming before you, which has come before you in small pieces in the past. And this is the Six Corners project, which the design is essentially complete at this point. The funding for construction is through a MassWorks grant that we received from the state. And at this time, we are looking to move forward with the land takings required for the project. The land takings kind of fall into three categories. There are 2 parcels that we will be taking in its entirety. One of them is an existing gas station. The gas station that is there now is not operating as a gas station. It is just operating basically as a convenience store at this time. And adjacent to it, there is a 2-family home that we will be taking. There are 4 other properties that we will be doing some small sliver takings. One of them 190 square feet, 200 square feet, 412 square feet, and 1,700 square feet. And then there are 13 temporary easements where we'll be installing sidewalks and driveway ramps, and it is customary for us to take easements associated with the abutting parcel in order to complete the work. The 2 complete parcels that we are taking, back in February, all of the letters went out from the DPW and the Law Department to the impacted property owners, discussing the prices that we are paying for the impact of their property, both complete takings, sliver takings, and the temporary easements. The 2 properties that we are taking in its entirety, we have met with both of those property owners. We have agreed upon the compensation for the property at this point. When the vote to approve, assuming the vote to approve tonight, the next step that we have with those 2 properties is that we work with them on relocation of their business and of their home. We have a relocation consultant that is working for the city on this project. Once they are completely relocated and compensated, the project will be able to start. The project we hope would be able to start later this summer or as soon as the residents and businesses have been relocated. The total amount that we are looking for is $500,000, I'll make sure I have the correct number here, 506,000, 503,000. 508, 508, 530, that is being paid for as part of our Mass Works grant.
Any questions or comments from the council? Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think it was brought up at the meeting tonight that you've been able to work with the people that are impacted by this and the businesses, and it's all been worked out to the satisfaction of everybody involved. Is that correct?
Yes, we have.
And I think that's an important, and you've had public hearings on this.
We've had dozens of public hearings on this project.
Councilor Allen.
Public hearings
Thanks,
are
Mr.
important.
President. Yeah, Chris, which neighborhood councils or civic associations have you had to deal with on that?
We have been in front of, I believe, Upper Hill, Old Hill, and Six Corners on this project. And most of the meetings that we had were combined. Because rather than going independently and kind of treating them independently, we brought them all together. This was also discussed when we had those kind of major neighborhood groups that were created following the tornado, where the city was kind of split up into 3 sections. When they were doing the initial report. That was where the birth of this project really started.
Are there any concerns from any of those groups?
No, I mean, we've been through all of these meetings. Most of the discussions obviously were somewhat specific to a particular person's property. At the time, compensation items weren't discussed, relocation items weren't discussed, and once we got to this point, everything seems to be fine.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Letterman.
Chris, we talked a little bit about this in the committee, but for folks that weren't there, the residential multifamily property that's being taken, that is occupied, both units. Could you talk a little bit about the assistance that's being provided to the families there, both the relocation and then the extended service?
Correct. Thank you, Counselor. Number 1, compensation for the owner of the property. The owner is a landlord that has a number of properties there. But secondarily, we also provide relocation assistance to the tenants that are in the home there, working through directly with them and through the landlord. Their relocation expenses are taken care of by the city. There is also a differential involved that if they are moving to another property that may have higher monthly rent, we also in general work with tenants that may have vouchers for certain type of assistance through the city and or state. So all of those cases, when we start working with these people, the intent is that if they're relocated to another home, that they're not incurring any financial hardship with regard to the relocation, and any assistance that we can provide, we being the city with our relocation consultant, to assist them in the general processes as well. We provide that as well.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Councilor Edwards.
The Methuen Neighborhood Council was one of the councils that was individually giving presentation by Chris and his team, and I've attended multiple meetings that were across neighborhoods between Old Hill, Maple High, Six Corners, and the Upper Hill Council. Generally, most of the concerns that were generated were not about the businesses. The gas station, I believe, is the EPA is going to force them to put 2 tanks in. So this is probably the best scenario for them personally, and they have come to an agreement. And in the housing situation, once again, that's been negotiated. Most of the angst that has been generated about this project has been, and I want to say this very nicely, the lack of vision of what Chris is proposing to do. This is, the definition in itself causes confusion because he's proposing to do a roundabout, which is not a rotary, but they're in the same family. Is that accurate?
They're cousins.
They're cousins. And a lot of people are just trying, this is one of the most dangerous intersections in the city. It is a problem site. It is confusing for anybody who's driven there. Even with the lights, it's very confusing. If you get too far out, you just kind of have to keep going through, and the distances that are involved are really offsetting. It's hard for a lot of people to kind of envision the need or how people are going to be forced to slow down before they even start into the rotary. There was concerns about, there's at least one business owner that I know is very concerned about the ability of fire engines and large trucks to be able to maneuver through this. Chris has assured me, and his team has been very helpful in assuring the neighborhood that all of these things have been taken into consideration, and they're confident that this is not a problem. I'm respectfully asking people not to look at the East Long Meadow Rotary as an example of what's being proposed, but I believe it is Northampton. There's a rotary in Northampton is more acutely accurate of what is being proposed. So that's been the biggest problem is that people just having a hard time kind of figuring if people don't respect the light and how traffic is supposed to get through this thing, how pedestrians are supposed to move across, trying to get from point A to point B. And as Chris very eloquently stated, as it is now, you step off the curb, you've got to get through 2 intersecting directions of traffic just to get to the next curb. With this one, you're going only have to look one direction, either way, to avoid being hit. And it's wanting to be something much more safe. And I'm going to stand right now and say that I'm pretty confident as somebody who lives in this neighborhood, who has been at most of the meetings around this subject, that feels very confident that this is going to benefit the neighborhood and those who traverse these roads. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Ryan. Well, under council rules, we don't generally take public input on these items. If there's no objection, we can. However, it would be more appropriate. It would be more appropriate for a committee.
Mayor?
Councilor Edwards.
There has been a lot of meetings. Unfortunately, no disrespect to any of you, none of you were there that I can remember at any of them. And when I'm saying that is that this is not uncommon, that this is a neighborhood that if you're not going from State Street to get to Long Meadow or East Long Meadow, you're probably not going in there. We have no businesses for you to shop at, so most of you guys, when you come into my neighborhood, you're coming by invitation to my house or to somebody else that you're related to, or you're collecting your rent or looking for something illicit. That's just the reality. So I'm just going to say that while there may be some concerns and questions, the ideal that we could satisfy everybody does not exist. I did mention that there's at least one business that had concerns, but his concerns were anecdotal. Anybody else that would be here that would be making public comment has had opportunities and has been heard by multiple neighborhood councils, been heard by multiple residents, and certainly has been heard by myself and by Chris, his entire team, on multiple occasions. So I'm actually, in this case, I'm not in favor of suspending our normal rules. If somebody wants to put forth the motion to send to committee, I'll vote oppose it as well. This has been well vetted. This has been discussed multiple times. And I don't believe that anybody who would be making comments in opposition would leave this chamber, or to be factual, in my opinion, even if we did have a committee, they would not be satisfied. And the money's in the bank. It's coming. It's better than what we got. It may be difficult, but I don't see any reason why we shouldn't vote for this and get the construction started as soon as possible.
Councilor Twiggs.
I just want to ask Mr. Signoli, you mentioned something in your explanation that there's a small sliver taking. What is that?
There are, and I want to make sure I have the correct number when I say that, 4 properties where we're taking minor pieces. One of them, as an example, the Mascaro property, where Hancock and Walnut come together on the southern side. Their property comes to a point. We are taking a small piece at the end of it, a couple hundred square feet. So when I say the word sliver taking, I'm talking about very small pieces of land, usually at the points of a property.
Can we talk about Alden Street? Other than 1719 Alden, are you taking anything on Alden?
Nothing on Alden, no. There are some properties on Alden where we need temporary easements. We're reconstructing their sidewalks, reconstructing their driveway ramps. So we take a temporary easement during construction to make sure that we're able to complete the work.
Can you tell us what properties they are?
They are 20 and 25.
20 through 25?
20 and 25, 2 separate properties.
Okay. Oh, that's all?
That's it. I'm sorry. Just those 2.
Well,
I was going to sleep.
Let me tell you what my greatest concern is, greatest fear, and you could tell me if I need to have that fear. As I receive a lot of calls from that Alden Street area, and I can't think of that other street name, but in any event, people are concerned that they're not going to be able to get into their property because you're going to be laying if not lumber, some kind of steel pipes along the street, and they won't be able to get into their driveway. Can you confirm that or not?
One of the things that we do on any project is we mandate that access to properties have to be maintained at all times. Now, when we do a project like this, might there be a day at a certain point where we're going to be pouring your driveway ramp that we have to give you notice ahead of time? Yeah, that may happen for a day, but generally throughout construction, all properties have to have all access maintained at all times.
Okay, I think I see one of the owners there here tonight who had that concern. Michael, yes. Michael, he's on record saying that he's not going to block any residents from entering their home.
Any other questions or comments for the council? Councilor Ryan. Councilor Edwards.
If that be the will of the council, then I respectfully ask that it be a 2-minute time limit that's strictly enforced. My concern is that
that's all right.
May end up having to listen to things that I've heard multiple times repeated for a long period of time.
Just for the record,
you gotta talk to me.
With respect to public input, we did have a committee meeting on this topic, and we also have public speak out that folks can sign up for to speak on these sort of items. However, Councilor Ryan has indicated that he would like to suspend the rules. Councilor Edwards has recommended that we limit it to 2 minutes. Councilor Fenton.
I'm going to object to suspending the rules to hear
Okay.
from However, I would like to hear from Attorney Breck, who's here this evening, about whether or not we're required to conduct a public hearing in the context of an eminent domain proceeding, because it's my history and understanding that that's the way that we've conducted those types of dispositions of land in the past. So if we're able to end public testimony, I'd love to do that. But I want to hear Attorney Breck tell us whether or not that's something that is available to us.
Good evening, councilors. Kathleen Breck, Deputy City Solicitor. So typically, Councilor Fenton, what we do is it's a public meeting, but it's not a public hearing. So when we do eminent domain takings, and that's when you see me, when we're doing eminent domain takings, it has to be done in a public meeting by the City Council and later approved by the Mayor, but you don't have a requirement for public testimony.
Understood.
But there have been public hearings, I believe Chris mentioned several of them, out in the community. Councilor Edwards has been at several. So there have been opportunities for public input, but you're not required to do that tonight.
So, Mr. President, I object to further public testimony, and I move that we move the question.
I'll second that.
All right. Motion made by Councilor Fenton, seconded by Councilor Williams to move the question.
President, I agree with Councilor Ryan. I don't see what harm it would do. We've been here almost all night. We've heard everybody else. Why not give the people that are impacted an opportunity to say what they have to say? It might make a difference in what we think and how we vote.
There's a motion on the floor to move the question. And which requires a 2/3 vote, and so roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On ending debate and moving the question, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs. No. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
No.
No. Councilor Walsh. No. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
No.
No. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash. No. Councilor Hurst. No. Councilor Ryan. No. Councilor Allen.
No.
No. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. Not sufficient. Are there any further questions or comments from the council?
Motion to limit each speaker to 2 minutes, please.
Second. I object.
There's an objection. It has to be unanimous. Is there any further questions from the council?
Even though we took a vote, you can still.
All right, if there are no further questions, motions, or amendments, we will move on to vote on the item. I was advised by Attorney Davis that we will be voting, or that we would have to take item number 17 first, prior to voting on item number 16.
Item number 17 is an appropriation order for the taking damages for the Six Corners Traffic Improvement Project in the amount of $508,530.
All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On granting the order, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs. Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez. Yes. Yes. Councilor Walsh. Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman. Yes, Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ash. Yes, Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ryan. Yes, Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved. Item number 16.
On approving the taking of easements, of land and easements for the Six Corners Traffic Improvement Project.
All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs. Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez. Yes. Councilor Walsh. Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman. Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you.
Item 18 is a bond authorization for police vehicles in the amount of $875,000.
No. Oh, no, I didn't do what I thought you could. Yeah, it's off. It's all good.
Good evening, Council. Jen Lyden, Springfield Police Department. We're here tonight to ask permission to purchase 21 vehicles to replace our fleet.
Any questions from the council? I'm assuming this item went through the Finance Committee, Mr. Chairman?
It's a recommendation of the Finance Committee to approve this matter.
All right, if there are no questions or comments from the council, all in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Roll call.
Excuse me?
Did they say how many vehicles?
If you would like to ask the question.
Please. How many vehicles we're going to purchase out of the $875,000?
Approximately 21, sir.
21?
Yes, sir. They're about $45,000 apiece, and that includes the radios and the mobile data terminals, the computers in the car.
Thank you. Jesus, I want to get in the car sale.
Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a plan going forward about how to ensure that the fleet stays up to date, or is the department taking it sort of as it comes?
We have a expected plan of 20 to 30 vehicles a year. We request that in the annual capital plan process, and we're approved $875,000 to go to council.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On approving the bond, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Twiggs. Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez. Yes. Councilor Walsh. Yes. Councilor Fenton. Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Hurst. Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Councilor Allen. Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved.
Thank you.
Item number 19 is a bond authorization for MSBA ARP project in the amount of $2,391,493.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is not necessarily a new item for the City Council. We've authorized the city to issue or to submit the accelerated program for the MSBA. This is actually us just authorizing the debt. The city's portion is $478,299. It's an 80-20 project for windows and doors at South End Middle School.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On allowing the bond, Councilor Williams.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Twiggs.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Gomez. Yes, Councilor Walsh. Yes, Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ash. Yes, Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ryan. Yes, Councilor Allen. Yes, Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Order is approved.
The next item is item number 20. It is first step for an amendment to Chapter 118 of the Springfield City Ordinances.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've sponsored and with Attorney Davis, with her assistance, brought forward this ordinance change for you tonight. I'm going to pass around some pictures of what I'm talking about here. There is a real serious epidemic problem across the city of illegal signs being affixed to utility poles and light poles. And you may have seen them. We buy houses, diabetic testing strips for sale, and everything in between. Discount mattresses, and they're defacing public property. In a lot of cases, zip ties are used. In other cases, there's screws and nails that are being used to affix these to city or utility-owned property, and it's become a big problem. Specifically in East Springfield, the East Springfield Neighborhood Council has actually created a small anti-sign pollution task force, and they keep track of how many of these illegal signs they're able to remove. And the most recent statistics that they keep track of on their chalkboard, if you will, at their meetings, is that since November 1st of 2017, they've removed over 105 signs of this nature from the right-of-way and from utility poles. Currently, this type of activity obviously is illegal under our ordinances. My proposal is to now, for the first time, attach a fine to this behavior and do it to the tune of $300 per occurrence. That's the proposal. It would enable our ordinance officers within the Springfield Police Department to issue these types of tickets, and it would apply to anybody that's affixing signs illegally to poles that are in the right-of-way. I should just say, the problem has gotten so bad that there are actually some businesses that aren't afraid to put their logo on the signs that are going up. And tonight I'd like to call out one business in particular that I've noticed has done it across all of Western Massachusetts, and that's a company called Dave's Trucking on Page Boulevard. This company has installed these signs, in some cases, over 25 feet in the air above the road. Now, you need something more than a ladder in terms of equipment to get a sign that high up on a utility pole. I see it every time I get off the Mass Pike at the end of 291. There it is, right on the red light. Now, that's Chicopee, but coming downtown to go to work at the viaduct interchange between 291 and 91, I mean, they've got them in the viaduct. They've got them zip tied to the actual highway. And so it's a marketing strategy, it's a guerrilla marketing strategy that is illegal and we should take very seriously. My constituents in East Springfield are taking it very seriously, and my proposal here tonight is that we do something about it and we actually attach a $300 fine per occurrence to this type of activity. Would not apply to signs that are posted in the tree belt, but it would apply to signs that are fixed to any type of pole in the municipal right-of-way. There are carve-outs for people that have express permission from DPW on a temporary basis to post these types of notices. Obviously, DPW is not giving permission for discount mattresses and we buy houses signs.
Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to commend Councilor Fenton on something that I think is long overdue. I certainly got annoyed seeing so many candidates running for city council in particular posting their logos and their marketing materials on city poles. It's tacky as, I don't want to swear, but it's tacky, and do the work, knock on some doors. truth be told. But with that being said, it also raises and poses a question that I do have. In the event that something is posted to a street light from a campaign in particular, but it was not the individual running for office that did it or someone from their camp, how is that to be handled?
Councilor Fenton?
You read exactly what we have. Any person or entity found to be in violation of any provision of this section may be subject to a fine of up to $300 per violation. Found to be. That's a question of fact for the cops to decide. What that means is up to the cops.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Hurst.
Springtime's around the corner. We have a lot of people who like to tag sale. And so oftentimes I see a number of signs directing people towards a particular property. Now clearly, it'll be easy to find them them guilty if they post a sign, because they're likely going to post their address as well. But does this apply to those individuals? And if so, should it apply?
The carve-out. There is a carve-out, and it says, nothing in this section shall apply to the installation of a metal plaque or plate or individual letters or figures on a sidewalk commemorating any historical, cultural, artistic event, location, or personality, or any temporary notice for which the Director of Public Works has granted written permission. So if you're posting tag sale signs on utility poles and you don't have written permission, the way that this is drafted, the police would have the discretion to issue you a ticket.
So I'm sorry, when you say written permission, you just, when they go to I mean, I guess they have to apply for a tag sale license, right? They have to take out they have to get a permit. So is that the written permission that they would need? Is that, so they need to contact Chris every time they have a tag sale and want to post a sign and get his written permission?
I know you're not going to like the answer, but my answer would be yes. I'll leave it to Chris.
My answer is yes also. Anything that is placed within the right-of-way without a permit is considered illegal. People come to us for permits. Things such as a tag sale that might be there for a day or two usually isn't an issue. There are certain properties in the city that have tag sales every weekend. That are issues in certain neighborhoods. So there is a crackdown right now. The ordinance and building code department inside the building department, along with the ordinance squad, is out there constantly pulling these signs out. But anybody who requires installation of anything within the public way is required to come to DPW. Under no circumstances would we ever issue an approval for anything that would be placed on any regulatory pole. So if there is a street sign that is out there, under no circumstances could you ever put anything on there. If there are signs that talk about parking and no parking, nothing can be installed on that. On a light pole that is owned by either Verizon, Comcast, or Eversource, they require Eversource's permission to be able to do that. So there are all sorts of rules and regulations. Do we get to every one of them? No, we don't. But technically, that is in violation.
And Mr. President, if I just may, I mean, the concern is a legitimate one about tag sales. That's certainly not who we're after with this legislation, but we can't, because of the First Amendment, we can't control the type of speech based on content. So we can't say that a tag sale is different from somebody who's trying to sell a mattress or diabetic testing strips. And so we have to be sensitive, and I struggled with that, Councilor Hurst, in terms of seeing what types of carve-outs would be appropriate or available. Obviously, different types of speech affect people differently, but when we're regulating the right-of-way and municipal resources and saying whether it is okay or it isn't, to put any kind of a message on this pole that's owned in some cases by the city and in some cases by utility companies, in all cases on land owned by the city, we can't, unfortunately, parse between different types of speech without running afoul of that. So what I would say is that it's a matter of discretion for the police department, and I expect that they would exercise that discretion in this case effectively and judiciously so that we really get the people that I think everybody here is frustrated with.
Councilor Shea.
I would point out, I think, Councilor Hurst, in order to have a tag sale, I believe you have to go down to the clerk's office and get a permit. And I would think if they're not doing that, maybe with this ordinance, we could be sure that they were instructed when they got their permit that they can't put the signs in those locations, and if they do, they at least expose themselves to the penalty. At least there would be some notice to the individual before they went out and put them up, because I think really that's what your concern is people are going to run out and put the signs up, and next thing you know, we're going to come by with that fine, that $300 that all should go on those snow things I keep telling you about.
Councilor Walsh.
Well, I have a question about missing children and dogs. People put those signs up all the time because something happens and it's immediate. Do you support dogs and children?
Children, yes. Dogs, no. No, I mean, obviously there are different types of speech, and we could go back and forth all night about the examples where it's not offensive, and it's not an abuse of public space to do that. My intent is to find a way to get at the most egregious offenders who are taking advantage of a situation that has been appropriately used by some of the more sympathetic examples that were discussed earlier tonight. So, in my opinion, I don't think we can differentiate. We have to decide, do we either want to give the cops the authority to fine the bad offenders or not? And if we trust the police to do it and do it effectively, then the answer should be yes. And if we're worried that the cops are going to be out there and writing $300 tickets for people who are posting missing child flyers or tag sale flyers, then the answer should be no. I feel the answer is yes.
Councilor Ryan.
I think 300 is too much for certain ones.
One size fits all, $300 for first offense. So this is the first step, correct?
Yes.
First step.
Yeah. So, first step's first step. But I would actually send it to committee afterward and really kind of think, do you want to have kind of a graduate?
Yeah.
First time, $200 second time. Because if they're writing a ticket for Joe Smith, there should be something within their. If the police officer is writing, there should be some kind of database that allows us to determine whether Mr. Smith has been previously cited, and now this is your third time, so it's $300. So.
And when your pet's missing, it's pretty emotional.
The first time they've done something wrong, I would strongly suggest we look at it when it comes back around and graduate progressive.
Councilor Edwards.
Good idea.
Actually, passing first step, in fact, does send it to committee, and I support it going to committee for that purpose and reason. This is similar to an issue that I brought up a few years ago, not in here, but I had a fight with the Springfield newspapers about. Many of you who live in residential areas get the sales flyer in the newspaper. They are contracting those out. And my problem is when the guy that's contracted to do it would just throw them to every house on the street, and in fact, the houses be vacant. And if you live in a neighborhood like mine, you can ride through and you'll find 10, 15 of them that are just sitting there rotting in somebody's driveway at a vacant property because the contractor, even though he knows nobody's living there and the house is boarded up, is still throwing them out there. And it was a long fight, and my board is Keep Springfield Beautiful fought because we took that as litter. And I believe it was with the assistance of Mike Cass, who is an employee who actually does graffiti remediation on behalf of the city, that we finally convinced the newspaper office, at least certain neighborhoods, were not appreciative and allow people to opt out of receiving them. Either way, it's still a form of litter, and the signs constantly put up. Just simply having the fine doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be enforced, and it should be enforced at the discretion of the police officer. But it's very simple to address the concerns of my colleagues as to whether somebody's having a tag sale doing this thing. Is simply is to allow for an appeal of the ticket, just like you have an appeal of your parking ticket. You can appeal the ticket, and then you can go and argue before somebody as whether or not it's appropriate. And I'm sure as soon as Dave's Trucking gets the first one, they're going to raise hell and call somebody. But this is not intended for my neighbor who has an occasional tag sale. It might be for the people on St. James Avenue that has a weekly tag sale, but generally, when you go, if you're doing the right thing, and the police officers, and one of the things that we got to take notice of, across our city and most of our neighborhoods, our commissioner and the police department has done a wonderful job of starting to put officers in the neighborhoods on a regular basis so they know where they're patrolling. They're not patrolling 16 acres on one day and downtown on another day or whatever. They're there regularly, and there's usually an ordinance officer. Like in my neighborhood, it's Officer Tybersky who's responsible for these types of ordinances. I think that it can go to committee and we can have those types of discussions. Ask some of those ordinance officers to come in and we can have a conversation about their thoughts on how to implement this and what the fine should be, and trust that their discretion would be such that if they are having a repeat person constantly putting up the signs, then it can be addressed with a fine. But they also recognize that my dog got lost and I threw a sign up there. That's not the type of litter or concerns that caused this neighborhood council to be so frustrated that they actually started counting them and actively removing them.
Is there any further discussion? Any motions, amendments? All right, seeing none, this is a voice vote for First Step. All in favor of First Step, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
The next item on tonight's agenda is a zoning ordinance to change the zoning of the property at 69 Parker Street from Business A to Business B. This is on for first reading, and there is no action required by the council. The next item is item number 25, which is a petition from Mobility to install equipment on poles on Taylor and Dwight Street. This item was referred to committee on February 5th, 2018.
Good evening, councilors. As Attorney Wilson stated, this was brought before the Board of Public Works and was brought to the council and referred to committee. I have not received any contact regarding the mobility company regarding this issue to be brought forward to the council. As stated at the previous meeting, I am 100% against this. What they want to do is install materials on our mast arms, traffic poles in the city of Springfield that the DPW owns, but there has been no request to have a subcommittee meeting, as it was referred. So,
how long has this item been in committee?
It's been in committee for, at this point, a little over 2 months.
Okay. So do we have to take action?
It will remain on the agenda. At a certain point, I believe I'm forgetting, I got to look at the rules again, but at a certain point, it will die in committee if if it's not brought out.
Okay. It would die in committee.
So if the council takes no action, it'll just remain in committee from this meeting.
Is there any discussion on this matter? Any motions, amendments? Mr. Clerk?
So no action. Moving on to the next item, which is item number 26. This item is also in committee. This is the Chief Diversity Officer Ordinance. This item was referred to committee on March 12th, 2018.
Councilor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. President. Per Councilor Edwards' remarks earlier this evening about the subcommittee that was held under general government, we feel that at this time it's the appropriate step to send this back to subcommittee for further discussion and deliberation regarding some more statistical information from the city in terms of public records about the levels of diversity in our departments, as well as just for the opportunity to maybe have a chief diversity officer actually be present at one of the subcommittees that we have for this to share their experience and knowledge about their roles and responsibilities as the CDO. So again, I would appreciate if the body would allow this to continue for further discussion.
Thank you. Councilor Allen.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. President. Just a quick comment. I had some questions about this today, and I talked to Councilor Williams, and just want to pay him respect for listening to what I had to say in terms of strengthening this or looking at this a little deeper and putting it back in committee. I think it was we had a very long and not a contentious conversation, but a deep conversation. And I appreciate your move. Thank you.
Councilor Walsh.
Oh, I'm just waiting for the PVTA.
Okay. Is there any action needed? Okay. All right, next item, Mr. Clerk.
The next item is under suspension. It is the PVTA resolution sponsored by Councilor Letterman.
All right, this is the final item of the evening. I have to abstain from this one, and so I'm going to ask Vice President Kateri Walsh to take over for this agenda item.
Come on, baby boy. Let's go. You do good, boy.
On the PVTA resolution, is there a sponsor?
Thank you, Madam President. Feels good to say that. I know it's been a long night, and just wanted to bring this resolution forward. We've discussed a couple of times in this chamber and in committee regarding the situation across the Commonwealth with our regional transportation authorities. We held a Maintenance and Development Committee meeting where we received an update from the PVTA Executive Director, as well as our local officials, about the impacts that the proposed level funding that's come from the Baker administration and the Department of Transportation will have on regional transit authorities across the Commonwealth, but especially on the PVTA. We have one of the largest regional transit authorities in the Commonwealth. We also serve one of the lowest income populations. Today, the PVTA board was forced to approve service cuts and a fare increase as a result of their continued level funding. This is the second year in a row that our regional transit authority has received level funding. We are seeing the impact that has been described by Sandra Sheehan, the executive director of the PVTA, in our last meeting as essentially the erosion of our public transportation authority in the Pioneer Valley, and other public transportation authorities are feeling the brunt as well. They also, in Springfield, we are going to be hit the hardest by the rate increase as a result of a number of individuals in our city that are low income. We're also hit the hardest by the service cuts because we have the most routes by very nature of our size. And so this resolution calls for the state delegation to increase the RTA line item in the state budget to $88 million. That is the amount that was estimated in the 2009 transportation study, which did see an increase in service as a result of the study that showed that more service was needed to adequately meet the needs of the residents of the Commonwealth. And that is what I feel would be the responsible way to fund our regional transit authorities. In 2018, when we're talking about unprecedented economic development, both in the Commonwealth and in the city of Springfield, we should certainly be expanding public transportation and not cutting it. And I also think that to lay the brunt of this on the backs of low-income and working-class individuals who rely on this public transportation is an extraordinarily poor policy decision. So I won't read the entire resolution, but I will read the end of the resolve, which it would be what we are ordered. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Springfield City Council urges in the strongest terms the members of the General Court fund the Regional Transit Authority line item in their respective FY 2019 budget at no less than $88 million.
Councilor Edwards.
I rise as a co-sponsor of this resolution. It's just the right thing to do. It's common sense, as my colleague has very eloquently stated. We depend on PVTA. Our constituents depend on it. They are one of the largest service providers. And when you start to listen to the people talk about taking a bus to get to daycare, to drop their kids off, and then having to take 2 more buses to go to school, that type of burden in our community is more common than we would like to think it is. And we're just asking for what's fair. We here in Western Massachusetts help pay for the Big Dig. We pay to keep the trains running in the Boston area, and their transit system is running based on much of the dollars that we're sending. we're asking for some fundamental fairness, and we're asking for our legislators, our local legislators that are going to Boston. And let me assure you that I'm confident they get it. It's an uphill battle where they just don't have the numbers and the political clout to force this type of expenditure. But this resolution, or this resolution sends a message of support to our legislatures, and hopefully they can go forward and use it as a club or as a tool to convince our colleagues in the eastern part of the state the value of our local PVTA.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak on the resolution? All those in favor?
Aye.
The ayes have it.
I have no further business before the body.
Any other items, Mr. Clerk?
I have no further business.
When's the next meeting?
The next meeting is April 23rd, I believe.
We're adjourned to April 23rd.